hasn't been
A
here.
lot of stuff is going to get
What's that?
changed around anyway.
Yeah, well, there's a lot, because we're
Typically
working
seeing all
new in Hassan on grant money for what we're doing up there. That's why this is good, the delays, because there's a lot that is changing in the state that affects other developmental projects that are going on. Part of it, we're doing a presentation tonight.
So what's the grant?
It's the workforce housing grant, one of the workforce housing grants.
Oh,
I hate using that word. But we're not
you know
talk-
what though? I'm learning because I did a thing through this housing grant that we have. They're doing these webinars and these meetings, and yesterday was one. And they really brought attention to the definitions of things. And so,
I know, because they're different from Massachusetts.
well, that's it. And a lot of people have their own perception of what the meaning is because they put things over the years without getting actual facts. So I think it's not.
It's a public
It
document.
used to be a bad thing for me, but it's not anymore.
Good, no, it's a good thing.
Yeah, and that's what but you have to. How do you get that out there?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. So that's what they're trying to show us is how to do that, how to handle that stuff. Hi there. Good. How are you?
In my opinion, is a big part of why we're in such a... Oh, no, it's me. It's just so I remember who I...
Is this me? This is me. Yeah. Neil's here.
Hey, how are you?
Did you get your papers? I printed them out earlier, unless there's other stuff over there. The deep dive this afternoon.
That's Joseph's copy. They ran out of copies of that.
Oh, this is from you?
That and the other one is just as important.
Well, Neil's here. I think Neil went to that one, so a couple of minutes.
Yeah, would you suggest we table it? You don't want to be the one to do it.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Or no, I don't need to do it. I just need
Yeah.
to take the...
No, I'm fully happy to do that. I was going to wait for the discussion afterwards.
Yeah, okay. I am all set being that guy. I mean, I'm good to be that guy.
All right. Well, Joseph, I think I saw Neil walk in, so I'm going to give it a couple of. I think it was him. Caught a glimpse. Be a phantom. But.
Yeah.
So Zach, I think I just saw Neil coming by, and
Oh, okay.
I think it was him out of the corner of my eye, but we'll just give it a couple minutes. And... Hey, Neil. Good. How are you?
Joseph, can you share your extra copy from Stephanie?
So, it is 6:33, and I call this January 19th meeting of the Plymouth Planning Board to order. I'll begin with the roll. Rebecca,
I'm here.
Phil,
Here.
Neil,
Present.
Mike Ahern,
Here.
Mark,
Here.
Susan,
Here.
and alternate members, Zach, here in the audience, Michael Bouchard,
Present.
and Peter Julia is excused for the evening. And just looking over, so everyone seems to be present. So you may participate in the discussions, but we won't seat you as a voting member this evening. So we'll begin with our minutes from January 5th, and you should all have a copy, hopefully, and take a moment to take a look at them. And the only thing I was noticing, and this is more just a point of clarification if I didn't remember correctly, were there no abstentions on the last
There
minute?
were 2 abstentions.
I thought there were, yeah. It said all members voted
I
in favor.
abstained, and I think Mark did too, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
What I recalled. Thank you.
She's right. Good memory.
Just keeping track of you.
Someone asked it.
I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Hey.
All right, the minutes are approved of January 5th. Have there been communications received by the board, Joseph?
No additional ones.
I know we got some in the packet, and I assume we can look at those as we get to the zoning amendments, since they at least the one letter pertains to that. Okay. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to our first public hearing for the evening. We have the second of our 2 public hearings this January of the 2023 zoning amendments. And just say a few words about this before we begin. First of all, if you haven't had a chance to look at them yet, there are copies of the actual changed text up here, and the more narrative descriptions of the zoning amendments are also available. I would say at Town Hall at this point is a little late, but also online.
And there should be copies on the back table, but
Thank you.
if those ran out, there's more up here.
Yeah, so just a bit of information for those of you unfamiliar with the process. We have a zoning ordinance in Plymouth, and it sets out the legal parameters for land use in Plymouth, what uses and other regulations, setbacks, and so forth are enforced in each zone area of the town. And so this is the document with the legal teeth to enforce land use in Plymouth. It's based on many different pieces of input, including our master plan and communication with members of the public and the process as it unfolds. And once a year, we'd usually take a look at potential amendments to make to that document to keep it up to date and relevant to planning in Plymouth. And so we appreciate feedback at all points in the process. And in fact, this summer or late spring, we had several walking tours or 2 walking tours of downtown, which we looked at the village commercial zone to kind of get ideas and kind of actually see it in place as we were discussing potential issues that come up. And so there's various ways in which we get feedback. And at the end of the process, there are public hearings that are scheduled, usually right around this time, as per the state regulations, to hear back more formally from the public. So that's where we are right now, our second of our 2 public hearings. Yeah, so the way we're going to do this is we have 7 amendments to look at. I believe it is 6 amendments to look at. And we will take a look at each one of those in turn. I'll give a brief introduction to each one, and members of the public are invited to speak. If you want to speak, come up to the podium, try to keep it to 3 minutes. If we have extra time, we can always come back and say some more. And speak as specifically as possible. So try to keep out of vagaries and assumptions and just kind of speak to the specific issues as best you can. And we do look forward to hearing your impact and or hearing your voice and seeing how it impacts our decisions. So with that being said, it is currently 6:39, and I'll open our public hearing. And again, I'll just begin by saying a few words about each amendment as it comes up. And so our first one has to do with area dimensions. This is Article 3, Section 304 of our zoning ordinance. The narrative description that's been published is reducing front setbacks in the single-family residential, multifamily residential, and village commercial zones, as well as establishing a maximum setback in the village commercial zone. So this has come out of our walking tours and looking at what actually in the built environment conforms or not with our zoning ordinance, and there's quite a bit that does not conform with our zoning ordinance. So for example, our setbacks, like for example, a front setback, how far a building needs to be set back from the property line in the front. There are many buildings that do not conform to our zoning ordinance. And then the question is what to do about that. And so we thought about that. We thought about the historical character, for example, our village commercial, our downtown zone, and thought about the master plan and just saw discussions and see where they unfolded. And so what has come out of that is a proposal to reduce setbacks in the residential zones, or at least allow reduced setbacks by special exception in the residential zones, single family and multifamily, from 30 to 15. And if you walk around especially the core of the residential zone, there are a lot of buildings there that are less than 30. And so it would allow for, we can talk about what that might allow for as it comes up. And in the village commercial, that resulted in thinking about the kind of core of our really kind of vital commercial zone downtown, and seeing how the setbacks are quite small in that area. And therefore, much of that core area is actually out of compliance as well with our zoning. And so we were wanted to establish a 0-foot minimum in the village commercial to kind of echo a lot of what's already going on down there, and a maximum, which you don't have currently at all, of 10 feet. And this also fits into buildings with parking in front of them that have large curb cuts that affect the walkability of downtown, where cars are pulling in and out. And anyway, I don't want to talk too much. I probably am already. So setbacks in the single-family, multifamily residential, and the village commercial are one of these amendments. Are there any comments about setbacks? All right, thank you. Our next, it is 7. One of these missed the number. Oh, this is part of dimensions. That's what it is. Okay. So Article 4, also under dimensions, section 402, is measuring maximum height. And just to read the narrative here, allowing the maximum height of 35 feet to be measured from Main Street rather than average grade around the building. And the thought here was, if you are looking on the east side of Main Street, There's quite a grade there, and we currently measure the height by the average grade, and it's 35 feet, which leaves you, if you're doing the average, with not a whole lot of room to build on the facade on Main Street. Again, not really matching a lot of what's already built there. And also maybe perhaps being restrictive for what we might want to allow there. And that was kind of our thought process going into this. So instead, we'd be measuring from, on Main Street at least, give the option of measuring right off of Main, the same 35 feet, but not the average, but right off of Main. Yeah.
Give the option, or they would be required?
I believe the wording, if I had it, is you may,
Shall not be greater than 35 feet as measured by from the average elevation of Main Street along said frontage.
we had talked about this.
To
I'm
me, it
sorry.
sounds a little more definitive that it won't be greater
Yeah.
than 35 feet.
Height regulations.
It says
Yes.
rather than the average grade around the
Yeah.
building. It doesn't give an option for
Yeah,
both.
no, it doesn't. The narrative description actually says allowing the maximum height. This is more definitive in the actual wording of the ordinance, yeah.
So it doesn't give you the choice of the average. It has to be Main Street.
As it's currently worded.
So one side of Main Street is going to lose average height. The building will not be able to. And one side that's on the slope will gain a huge amount. And so anything on one side of the street could have a 2-foot wall on the back, whereas the other side of the street could have a 50-foot wall on the back of their property.
And I'm gonna, I do want to come back to that.
Okay.
And I want to leave this as more of the public focus hearing at this point. And at the end of this process, which I should have explained at the beginning, we'll close the public hearing and then discuss among ourselves how we want to go forward. That is a good point of clarification.
And I think that it's important for those that are on Main Street who may not think of something like that to be able to speak on it, because it's hard unless you have input and engagement and you get to the hearing and just explain the part that you want to, they may not know. So they have a chance now.
So is there any public feedback on the height limitations? Well, I think Frank might be coming up first, and then maybe we'll come after.
Frank Miller. I think one of the things that we should think about is some of the existing buildings that are at 35 or bigger already on Main Street, and they kind of innocuous and ominous, they're just there. I think it's possibly the architectural character of any new buildings that would be 35, and that would be the term as far as occupied level or the roof level, which is something you need to consider. We've had buildings taller than the 35 feet here on Main Street. Obviously, they no longer with us, but I think as we look to grow in next 20, 30 years, having buildings at 35, maybe even 40, with the proper architectural design would not put us out of our small town character atmosphere that's part of our zoning ordinance intent and purpose. The wording as far as 35 feet from Main Street also needs to be clarified as far as occupied level or rooftop level.
I believe that is already clarified in elsewhere in the ordinance in our definition of height, that it is the occupied level.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, a question. I think you have to define Main Street a little better than what you have here.
Okay.
Where does it start and where does it stop? Because this could go all the way to Campton, or it could go all the way to Ashland.
Well, this is specifically in the Village I believe it's the thing, the village. Where's the? It's actually, thank you.
I think the intention is the village commercial.
The intention is the village commercial.
I think you gotta be more specific.
Yeah. I will also, we'll talk about this later after the public hearing, but it's also important for everyone to know that we can make clarifying amendments before this goes to vote.
Clarifying edits.
Clarifying edits, as long as we're not changing the substance of what we're proposing. So I think clarifying village commercial, which I think we all intended, but didn't necessarily specify, is a good point.
It would be very easy to put in
Yeah.
within village commercial after Main Street to clarify that. Within the village commercial district, if we want it, if that was our intention.
Certainly what we were talking about as we were discussing the height limits.
Yes.
Are there further comments about height restrictions? Yes. Zach?
Zach Terrell, was the intent to reduce the height on one side of Main Street and increase the height on the other? Or should there be a clarifying edit to say, you know, the maximum will be the greater of the average grade or 35 feet?
The intention was to provide uniformity on both sides of the street, meaning that you could be 35 feet from street level to roof line along Main Street.
Currently, I don't believe any of the buildings on Main, with the exception of DNM, which is way over anyway, by any measurement.
And not subject to zoning.
And is not subject to zoning as well. At least the property isn't, the building was before zoning. But,
Well, I would think that the,
But otherwise, I don't think any of the current buildings actually do go over that.
okay.
And we might want to talk about, when we get to the session afterwards, whether or not we want to add language that clarifies the option of this or not.
If it helps, I just did a quick scan down Main Street,
Yeah.
and all of the buildings that exist on the west side of Main Street basically are built as the current footprint has basically a level grade around it, so it would not be making any buildings that are existing in conformity non-conforming. It might impact the development potential of property in the future, but that's what zoning does. It's okay. But we would not be making any existing properties non-conforming, in my opinion.
That's my assessment as well. Any further comments about height limitations? And I should also just mention, 35 feet is our current height limit around town, and we would just change how we measure that on the village commercial zone. Or I should say on Main Street.
In the single-family residential.
Hey.
I mean, sorry, in the village commercial.
Oh, I thought you were purposely tripping me up.
No, I just got super confused. And almost just, made a mess.
Okay, anyhow. So moving on to our next article. Article 4, Section 409 is accessory use chickens. Establishing criteria for allowing chickens to be kept in the single-family residential zone. Currently, there are chickens kept in the single-family residential zone, and they are not allowed. And the change here would bring some of that usage into conformity with our zoning, but in the process also put on a set of clear restrictions as to what is and is not allowed. So we bring some of that usage into conformity, but also clarify what types of animals we're talking about here, not just fowl in general, but chickens, the number of animals, 10, the sex of the animals, no roosters, and then also containment and waste issues. And so, yeah. Is there any comment about the chickens in the single-family residential? And I should say, if we have time at the end and somebody wants to come back to one of these, we can always come back for some further comments. But, okay. Our next amendment is Article 7 of the ordinance, floodplain development, and these are amendments necessary to comply with the National Flood Insurance Program and to maintain our part of that program and allow for floodplain insurance, or flood insurance, I should say. We need to make certain changes to comply and update our standards. So we can debate that, but it seems in many ways a kind of a, are there comments on that? Okay. Okay. So our next amendment is Article 12, Section 1204.3D, Special Exception Criteria, Off-Site Parking. Amending the criteria for special exceptions for off-site parking facilities to state that they shall be reasonably and safely accessible from the use the parking facility serves. And this is a change that would replace a 300-foot number for the distance allowable by special exception for off-site parking to the specific language is clear here. The wrong one. Oh, there it is. Okay. The proposed off-site parking facility must be reasonably and safely accessible from the use for which the parking facility is provided. And we do have somewhere a letter speaking to this, but we can start perhaps with public comments. Is there any public comments about this amendment? There it is.
Hello again. I am in favor of having this read safe and reasonable location. For people that don't understand 300 feet, the east side of the common measures out 300 feet. So if you were to park your vehicle down by Fox Block and come back to shop at Chase Street Market, you'd be walking approximately 350 feet. Or if you parked at the south end of the common to go to a Silver Hall concert, you're well over the 300 foot, but limited parking, that's not an unreasonable. The key to this is the safe design of the sidewalks or the ways getting to those areas. So the safe and reasonable, I believe, works and would be an effective criteria for off-site parking.
Right.
Hi, my name's Norm Samaha, and I'm a little fuzzy on exactly how this plays out. But is this allowing people, like if they're, for example, I have Thai Smile and there's 4 apartments right above it. Their parking is off-site across the bridge. Is that going to allow them to have free-range parking on this side of the bridge? Is that like one of my, I'm kind of confused.
I'm not certain we as a board can answer that question. That would be up to the zoning board to decide if that is reasonably safe for off-site parking.
Well,
Okay.
Can I offer clarifying?
But it is the bridge is also changing.
Yeah, if currently the parking, we could not prohibit that setup currently because the off-site parking is actually in a different town.
Yeah.
If you were proposing off-site parking,
No, I'm just worried about my business because we have limited parking. It's pretty what would you say, not really paid attention to, especially the 30-minute side of the main street. We see very little attention paid to it. College kids parking for 1 to 2 classes at a time. It's hard to being in the convenience business and having no place for your customers to park. Now, I mean, I've got 4 apartments above Thai Smile with the potential for 4 in each. That's 16. Now, if they're not required to park on their side of the, like in their required parking on the other side of the bridge, am I looking at a potential of 16 people fighting for spots in a place where my customers are supposed to be coming into? Because I'm already limited, like, I'm fighting for parking as it is with the, you know, there's not much going on with the way that people are looking at the parking.
So currently, to have housing in the Village Commercial District, you don't need to provide parking.
Okay.
This amendment really just changes how far, if someone wanted to have off-site parking, so in Plymouth, on a piece of property that was not contiguous or on the same lot as the building where the residences are. This allows for a separate lot to support a
And the limit's only 300 feet now or something like that?
Limit is 300 feet now.
And you want to extend it?
No.
We want to
No.
make it, go ahead.
Thank you. It's my understanding we determined 300 feet was pretty arbitrary, and so we tried to put a sort of a qualification on there because a 70-foot, you could be within 70 feet of the parking lot and the residence, but what if you had to cross Tenny Mountain Highway? That's not safe.
But I thought it was the Village District that
No,
we were...
it's everything but the single-family residential.
You just said Village Commercial.
Sorry, it's everything but the single-family residential. It's Village Commercial, it's every other zone except for the single-family residential.
So, for example, if you wanted to put parking in the, is it the Highway Commercial, which is North Main Street across the bridge, like, that could be 1,000 feet away. Technically, if with this zoning ordinance in place, if you could demonstrate that it was reasonably accessible and safe, you could have off-site parking there for something in Plymouth.
Right. I know. I'm just more worried about
You're limited.
these off-site people filling up Main Street, which is already at a pinch for parking. I mean, if you ask any business owner on Main Street, they'd love to see more accessibility to their businesses, and it's not, I don't want to say asking too much for the town to want the businesses to remain open and the people to be able to get into their businesses. And it just seems like, from what I'm gathering from this, is giving a little bit more free range to people that are building higher with, putting residential places in commercial areas, and the town's paying for it. The commercial businesses pay for it. Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. I just want my opinion heard. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Are there further comments?
Matt Yetton, and just wanted to speak on this briefly for a moment. With the Plymouth Housing Opportunity Planning Committee that's working with a professional planner, Barrett Planning Group, for the next some year possibly, to really look at and analyze specifically housing needs and such in our entire town. One of the components of having that professional planner involved with this town is their suggestions on the current regulations and zoning in this town and the potential changes to that zoning in our town. And just with something like this that could potentially have a big effect. It might not, like I said, I'm not going to get into assumptions. But with zoning that could affect housing, I ask that we table this one until we hear if, the planner has something. If this goes in, fits in line with, if there's a better way to go about it with housing. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So we do have a fairly extensive and well-articulated letter from David Kent. If you'd like to speak.
I'm David Kent. I live on Highland Street in a house that's too close to the road. It has been since 1804. I also am in favor of sex discrimination among chickens because we have that problem in our neighborhood, too. Notwithstanding that, I think the board should give this current proposed amendment some serious thought. I think it's an idea that has unintended consequences when you look at it. I'm strongly in favor of zoning. I taught zoning up at the college for 15, 18 years. Taught for the New Hampshire Bar Association. I understand zoning. I believe in zoning. I think zoning is a good thing. It prevents negative externalities. It prevents things happening next to you which you didn't anticipate that diminish the value of your property. And I think the amendment would do that. By going to a special exception from a variance, you lose a lot of the potential control over what happens to your neighbors. And I think that's a mistake. Neighbors deserve to be protected from one another. And to suddenly find out that you're going to have a parking lot next to your house, I think would be a grave mistake. So I wrote you folks a letter, and why did I do that? I did that because I missed the meeting. I apologize for that. It was my fault, not your fault. And I wanted to give you people time to consider what I thought about this matter before you came to a meeting. Because you can't give something good thought when you're sitting here. It's going to become difficult. So what are the unintended consequences? Fully understand the necessity of what was originally written in the downtown area. Because there isn't any parking in the Village Commercial District. That's the problem. And to solve the problem for downtown, we wound up with something which unfortunately had far-reaching impact. I think that's what became the problem. It initiated conversion of one-family houses to multifamily houses because it provides an opportunity for somebody to say, I have parking for 12 cars, and here's my parking area. I don't think it should exist anywhere except for the Village Commercial District, which was why it was put in the zoning ordinance in the first place. Unfortunately, it had legs and it moved where I don't think it really belonged. So what can you do? Like, at the very least, let's not go forward on this. Let's reconsider whether or not next year we ought to do away with this kind of a concept. We're gobbling up what could be housing for single families in this house and turning them into student housing. I understand that. You understand that. The housing committee or whatever it is understands that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a bad thing. Eventually it has an impact on our schools, has an impact on already has an impact on a lot of neighborhoods. And I know because I'm now surrounded by housing, this rental housing. And when I moved there, it was not that. So for many reasons, all of which I've articulated in the letter, and I hope you have an opportunity to study that and consider it, I really think it's an ill-advised thing at this particular point in time. I'm not saying you didn't think of everything, perhaps, at the time. It didn't sound like a good idea. I agree with the safety issue. Safety is good anywhere. But, when you come for a variance, and a variance is much more difficult than a special exception, there's no basis, really, for turning down a special exception under the criteria that you've granted in most circumstances. So therefore, it's the Wild West when it comes to parking. And we already have what's grown into the Wild West in terms of parking, and I think that's a mistake. If you want to protect people's and neighbors' integrity, I think you have to put a little more thought on this. That's all. I'll answer any questions if you got them.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, unless.
No, I had a clarification, but go ahead.
I was just going to ask if, and thank you for your comments. So currently you need a special exception in all zones for off-site parking. You're saying for anything greater than 300
You need a variance for off-site parking now.
No, it's a special exception.
I think that's a mistake.
So that's what it currently is right
It's a
now.
special exception for up to 300 feet. Beyond 300 feet.
That is a variance.
Right.
Right, that's what I'm at. I just want to make sure that you're
Right.
saying the variance for anything greater than 300 feet.
Right. I don't think it should exist at all. If I mischaracterized that, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you all.
Thank you. It's a very well-articulated statement. Appreciate it.
Okay. And I am not speaking for the ZBA. Okay? I want to make that very clear.
Yes.
Other members of the ZBA may have very different thoughts on this matter. I'm speaking for me, as a resident of Highland Street.
Thank you.
going to speak super quick on this topic. I think probably this board knows, as well as some of the boards I also sit on, that parking is maybe the biggest hot button issue in the town of Plymouth, just anywhere. It's like as soon as you touch parking, it's like touching a live wire. This particular amendment was introduced late in this planning board session. Still within the rules, totally allowed when it was introduced, but to introduce one of the hottest topic areas late in your season of deliberations and then bring it kind of fast into a series of hearings, I think's a little bit ill-advised. I've watched a couple of the sessions. I've seen some of the debates. Certainly, Mr. Kent raises some very good concerns. This might still be a great idea. I would strongly encourage this group to maybe let it bake in the oven a little bit longer. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
Frank Miller. I did the parking study in 2000, inventory of Main Street, and I redid it in 2020. We have a requirement for the 170 businesses that are on Main Street based on 3 spots per business. That would be 1 owner and 2 employees. A lot, it's an average. That comes to 505 spaces. We have 504. But if you want customers, you'll have to go to Holderness. Okay, reality is any action we take to try to resolve the parking issue is going to be through elevated parking structures somewhere along Main Street, the Village Commercial Zone. That's from Merrill to Warren Street. And we have current parking systems on Green Street, which people rent, substation and parking down by the senior center. Those already exceed the 300-foot mark as far as anyone actually purchasing or renting a spot and utilizing it as it was designed. So the 300-foot mark really was an arbitrary number, and it doesn't subtract or add anything to our parking spots. So I believe that the removing the 300-foot would put the existing spots that are available for the Main Street business community to rent from the town as a reasonable thing. And talking about safety, they are looking at putting out lights on Green Street so that people have a lit way. You have, obviously, when you have a parking spot, you get out of your car, you're looking for a sidewalk that's properly designed, located, and constructed, and goes to the Main Street business community. So this doesn't, removing the 300-foot mark does not add anything except the compliance capability of the existing spots that we have on Green Street to Main Street. And we still need to start to realize and recognize that in order to resolve the commercial parking problem around Main Street, we can only deal with areas from the Village Commercial Zone, which includes 200 feet west of Main Street to Green Street. Actually, Green Street's agricultural zone, but we need to look at how we can use the terrain to make elevated structures to consolidate the amount of parking we have. We don't comply with the reasonableness of parking for the total number of people for the type of businesses we already have on Main Street. And you have to remember, our Main Street is 250 years old. It was not designed, specified to any codes or standards. By the time we had zoning start here in 1961, your Main Street was fixed. That's why we have 0 lot line setbacks because we didn't have it. A lot of this stuff was before we were using horses. So needless to say, we're trying to adjust and look towards how we can adapt our existing structures to the next 5 or 10 years. And just removing the 300-foot, I believe, is a reasonable effort now to allow the compliance of the existing structures that we have on Green Street parking to be used correctly for the Main Street business community. And the substation parking lot has spaces open and available. The police department are the ones who administer and maintain the parking system. They're the contact points for the other new spots that were generated on Green Street to try to help with the employee parking issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Any further comments on the special exception criteria for off-site parking?
John, would you mind if I talked about one thing with the difference between a variance and a special exception?
You just go ahead.
So one of the things I want to make clear for those that are in the audience is that if someone were to file an application to have an off-site parking at this point, they would have to start with the planning board, and they'd have to bring us a site plan for this off-site parking facility. Ultimately, they would need to go to the ZBA to get a variance. I'm sorry. Let me back up. They would need to go to the ZBA to get a special exception because it's a use that is required by special exception. If it is further than 300 feet from the proposed business that they're proposing to park from, they would also need a variance. So you can't just file for a variance unless you have a decision that you are appealing. So the current zoning ordinance requires that someone come to the planning board first, be denied, so that they can appeal that decision to the ZBA. A special exception can go straight to the ZBA without appeal of a decision. Because it's defined in statute, you can start with the ZBA and say, I'm filing a special exception application for an off-street parking facility, and I need another special exception because it's greater than 300 feet away. So it does remove a step. It removes at least one visit from this board and would expedite the process as well.
Thank you.
John, I'd like to clarify something that one of the board members said.
Okay.
In relation to parking for the downtown commercial district. At our first hearing, it was noted by a planning board member that you have to have 2 parking spots per residential use in the village commercial. And I'm not an expert on what the village commercial requires. Then we had someone from the public let us know that there's no requirement for parking for the downtown commercial, which then made the planning board look unprepared.
Can I actually address this? If I could interrupt for a second.
And you may be right. That's what I'm going to get to.
You know, no, I don't even think it's right or wrong here. I think there is some lack of clarity on these issues in the current ordinance. And I think technically, you don't need any parking. However, it looks like something may have shifted along the way with unintended consequences. Like there may have been at some point going back an intention of a special exception, or I'm forgetting exactly what it is right now. It looked like there's some lack of clarity.
So I've got
in the special exception criteria for parking, that if you look in different parts of the zoning ordinance, it doesn't look like everything quite lines up logically. And I do want to actually have a discussion about this later.
But something was said just 10 minutes ago that I want to clarify. It may not be the case that you don't need parking in village commercial. And it would be nice, because the planning board really should understand what's going on in the village commercial with parking before something like this it's, before it goes to a hearing, we really look like we have egg on our face. Because someone on the Main Street said you don't need parking, and then someone else, a couple of businesses over, said, yeah, you do. And it's one space per bedroom in the Village Commercial. And then also said, another business owner said, well, it's incidental to the residential use if it's incidental to the business. And then there's wording in the zoning, depending on whether it's on the basement or second floor. So the planning board, I don't think there's anybody that can come up with, two board members come up with the same exact definition of what is allowed. And so I think we're really ill-prepared for this, and I want us to, but I think there's just so much that we don't know about it, and to be proposing this now is just not ready for it.
We're not proposing to change that.
I do want to have this conversation when we exit the public hearing, because there is some lack of clarity there. And I do still want to hear more from the public as well. But for now, I want to stick to this proposed amendment, which I know it's part of a bigger parking thing. And
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
I'm going to be clarifying things. Let me just point something else
Yeah.
that the ZBA had a problem with.
Okay.
The 300 feet,
Yeah.
is it as the crow flies, or is it walking distance? And that's a problem, because we had an application where it's 900 feet
Yeah.
if you drive or around,
Mm-hmm.
and it's 350 feet if you fly like a crow.
Yeah.
And the shorter way, a slightly longer way, is over somebody's private property. And so we have, kids, I don't mean to denigrate college kids, because I think they're, but they're gonna take the easiest way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all you can do is look at the trails up at the college, How do they decide where to have a sidewalk? Well, they look where the path is worn, and that's where they put the bricks. The same thing happens with this sort of a thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Research and inventory of a parking system. I went through the federal regulations, state regulations, the National Fire Protection Association regulations, and the insurance. Main Street, Plymouth, does not comply with any of those laws, rules, regulations, codes, or standards. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further comments? Okay. So moving on, we have two more amendments, which one of them, the first one is the special exception criteria for accessory family dwelling, deleting requirements for accessory family dwellings, which were previously replaced by accessory dwelling units. So this is kind of a housekeeping change. And at some point, as per state regulations, we removed accessory family dwellings, and we now have accessory dwelling units. And that is pretty well established throughout our zoning ordinance. There were a few places where that change wasn't fully implemented. And we just want to kind of clean some of that up and remove whatever remnants are left of the accessory family dwelling language in the ordinance. So it doesn't really change anything, it just kind of cleans some things up from a previous change that wasn't fully fleshed out. Any comments or questions about that?
That's just in Village Commercial?
No.
That's not why.
Yeah. In fact, it's statewide, and we're just fully getting ourselves caught up. And on a similar note, and these are some of the most extensive changes you'll actually see if you track the changes through the ordinance. Article 12, Section 1204.4, variance criteria, amending this criteria for a variance to comply with state laws. So as state laws change, so does our zoning ordinance to reflect those changes. And so there are certain parts of our ordinance that need to be updated simply to be in compliance with state law. And those include variance criteria. And we just heard a few words about what a variance is for those needing that clarification. Are there any comments or questions about that? Okay. That is the last of our amendments. Are there any further comments or questions that anybody wants to kind of come back to for any of the previous amendments at this point? Okay. It is 7:23, and I will close this public hearing, and I will return this back to the board. And so what I'd like to do is go through each one of these and see where we fall and see if we want to go forward or not with each of these individually.
On each?
What's that?
On each?
On each of the 7 amendments.
Right.
John, I probably should have mentioned this and stepped away from the board
Okay,
for the letter that was addressed to the Plymouth Planning Board.
okay.
Would you mind if I stepped away now?
You may.
So I'm Mike Ahern, but I'm stepping away from the planning board for a short period of time to talk about the HOP grant, which is a Plymouth housing grant. We received $130,000 to study housing in the town of Plymouth. We've hired a professional planner, and I received notice. There's 8 members on the HOP grant at this time. 5 members have written or have signed on to a letter, and I will read it. We, the undersigned, have a number of, understand you have a number of proposed zoning amendments. Oh, my God. That you are looking at. The housing grant study, which includes a newly retained professional planner now in effect for our town, is looking at what changes should be made to the town as it concerns housing. The issues that you are looking at, in particular, off-site parking, height of buildings in the village commercial, as well as setbacks, are items that the committee will be looking at and getting engagement from the public. We ask at this time that the planning board table the proposed amendments while we work through these amendments, important elements in our study. We expect the work to be finished in 18 months as we identify what needs the town has and how to provide the best way forward. Your efforts are acknowledged, but could quite possibly make our process more cumbersome as we look at existing regulations and the effects they have had on the town. We are all here for Plymouth's best interest. We ask for your cooperation in allowing the process to play out. This letter is signed only as local concerned citizen individuals, not as representatives of the Housing Study Committee, as no vote was made at that committee level. But we also happen to be 5 of the 8 who serve on the Plymouth Housing Study Committee. 3 of those members didn't get a chance to answer this letter because I cut the letter short and said the time for responding is over. But before I did stop that, I signed on, Sue Wood signed on, Bruce Wiggett, Matt Yetton, and Brian Chalmers.
And I'd just like to make a brief statement here. In getting those 5 signatures, there are different ways of reading the state's right to know laws, and we quite possibly, we, not myself necessarily, violated right to know laws about holding an unnoticed meeting by contacting every single member of a committee with committee work, and in earlier drafts defining this as members of that committee. And this is a very concerning development to me, that, again, there's room for interpretation of those laws, but to me at least, that seemed like an unnoticed meeting. And the original intent from the drafts that I saw was to sign it as members of that committee, not as members of the public. And I'm concerned about that.
John, I am too. Can I answer your concerns? Sure. Okay. So the question is, what is a public meeting and what is a noticed public meeting? One thing as a select board member, which I have been for 4+ years, and as a member of the planning board for 15 or so years, is we've never handled business in a non-public way the way Google Docs allows that to happen. And we've got notice, and I'm only mentioning this because you brought that subject up. Stephanie Vertile with the Office of Planning and Development is very concerned about the Google Docs meetings that have been held that you are chairman of that committee. So we need to, again, yes, I am concerned, but that raised some eyebrows. It raised some major concerns with how you're running the HOP grant committee. And it probably, we do need to make some changes, John.
And to address that, at the meeting when we first started using Google Docs, I expressed specific concerns about right-to-know laws, you might remember, and about having unnoticed meetings via collaboration on documents. And it was decided that those documents would be places to post up information to be discussed at meetings, and to collect a means of collecting information and not conversing and having a conversation through those documents. And that was a decision made in accordance with planning staff, because of my concerns about having an unnoticed meeting by collaborating on a document together. And so it was seen as a information gathering collection tool and not a collaboration tool or communication tool.
You might want to talk to the office.
Again, I was relying on planning staff, and not to throw anybody under the bus or anything, but.
No, we're not throwing Joseph under the bus, I agree.
I don't think right to know, I mean, if there was a violation of right to know, it's up to the public to complain, it's not up to us to complain, but right to know laws are pretty clear. If you're going, if a quorum, meaning a majority, is going to discuss business that is normally taken up by that board, there has to be an agenda, it has to be publicly noticed, and there have to be minutes. So keep that in mind for future discussions outside of normal meetings. Otherwise, you're subjecting yourself to violation of the right to know law.
And as far as me signing the letter, I did not sign it on behalf of the committee, and I had no intentions of signing it on behalf of the committee. It was purely because I'm a resident, and I am concerned about this, and if you remember correctly in the last few meetings, I have expressed concern about especially the 300-foot parking thing. There was not enough discussion. It didn't get the deserved discussion. So there are things that I have said in past meetings. So this did not come about, as far as I'm concerned, because of the HOP meeting. I listened to the webinar yesterday. I've listened to a lot of things with regard to this whole grant with Judy Barrett. And all this stuff is going to be covered in this assessment that she's going to do on the town.
And we'll get to some of that when we
I'm
go
just
through
trying
each
to just
individual.
tell you
Yeah.
why my name is on that, and I did not do it as part of the committee.
Rebecca.
I just think if we could get in a time machine and do this in a different way. I mean, not the ordinance, I'm just talking about the specific incident or comment from the committee. I think if every one of you wrote a letter and said, I'm on the committee, but I'm writing as an individual citizen, that seems acceptable, but to collaborate.
On one letter?
It looks like it, you're right.
You know, and that to me is where it gets a little.
It's not.
I
what
received
I
one of the
intended.
emails from Mike to ask me to sign on, and the email I received, the letter said, members of the HOP committee.
Where did it say that?
I can pull up the email right now if you'd like.
And
However, I think we're, I think.
I
we should
want to
come-
add one more thing,
Yeah.
John.
Yeah.
This letter would not have happened had a vote been taken at a committee meeting, and I tried to bring up at the last meeting twice, talking about it, but you as the chair cut me off and swayed the conversation away from talking about it. I wanted to talk about it at the meeting, but you didn't give it a chance.
Okay,
In defense of the chair sets the agenda and controls the discussion.
and right now, I'd like to control the discussion by
Please do.
moving back to our 7 amendments.
7 deadly amendments.
I'm gonna start by motioning that we move the changes to Article 3, Section 304 to the town for ratification at town meeting.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to forward Article 3, Section 304, area dimensions to town meeting. Is there further discussion?
I have, which one are we talking about?
Number
Phil?
1.
Number one,
Setbacks.
setbacks. I would suggest that we table that for now. And the reason why is it's going to have a lot to do with housing, and that's a main component of what the HOP grant is going to be looking at.
Is that a motion?
No, you've already made the motion.
We have a motion on the table
You can
already.
motion to table it.
You guys would have to rescind your
We have a
motion.
motion, yeah.
Okay. You're the chair. I'll let you decide the order.
Your motion.
So I think this, I really value the work that the HOP and the Housing Committee is doing. I'm sorry, I didn't say the right name, but I do think that when we're talking about the character of the single family and the multifamily residential zones, this isn't going to add. I don't think that this is going to. I don't see the work with the housing study changing how we want to have the character of our neighborhoods.
And we're bringing.
And
go
the
ahead.
village commercial zone. That's we're talking more about businesses and less about housing with these structures, because you do need to have a single or bottom floor residence. You need a variance or a special exception.
I'd say, and we're bringing vast portions of those districts into conformity by making this change.
And to me, the change is not huge. We haven't heard a lot of people say, yeah, it's a problem to me. And it very well could be that this is a great amendment, but we've had no input from anybody, whether tonight or over the past few months. It's just been us talking amongst ourselves.
We had
And
publicly notified walking tours where we talked about these issues, among other meetings where this was on the agenda and talked about.
There's public awareness, and there's a difference between public awareness and public engagement, and that's where we've been lacking. And it very well could be, this would be a great amendment, but I would love, there's no immediate concern to do it now, and I think the HOP grant studying this would probably be, we're all in it for Plymouth, and I think that's the way to study it. And it may be that they go one step further or one step less, we don't know. But the public will be brought in and bring in the stakeholders and get the engagement first.
Yes, Phil?
I'd like to say, I appreciate the concern for opportunity for public engagement. I think we have presented opportunities for public engagement. The site walks were publicly noticed. If anybody was engaged, they had an opportunity. The same could be said for the recent high school board budget committee hearing, which I think was attended by 6 people. And, for all the concern about the budget, there was opportunity. There was very little engagement. We have provided opportunity. I find it to be disingenuous to understand how much work this board has put into discussing these already and suggest that we hold off. This board has done plenty of work to understand what these changes are, how they impact the town. We have done the work to understand ourselves, and what we're doing is putting this forward the proposal is to put this forward to voters with the confidence that we have reviewed and recommended these changes. During my period on this board, there have been a couple of years where we've done a lot of work on zoning changes, and then as soon as we get kind of close to moving forward to town, somebody gets a little scared and puts the brakes on. And I can understand that, but I'm not willing to put these on the back burner indefinitely. We've done good work. I'm going to stick with my motion and move this forward.
One moment, Neil. I will also add, there was a lot of public engagement in the master planning process. Yeah. And the master planning process asked for a walkable downtown, small town feel, a downtown area suitable terrain for high-intensity residential and commercial use. And that came out of some pretty serious public engagement for the master plan. Yes, Neil?
I don't see any harm in allowing the citizens at town meeting to discuss this and make a final decision.
To be clear, this is the last opportunity for discussing. This is something that gets put on the ballot and voted on Tuesday. This is not up for discussion in the deliberative session.
Well, it can, it could be discussed in public media.
Yeah.
And I think this one there's actually a few others where there was actually no comments either tonight or on the 5th of January when we had the first public hearing. I'm just looking back at my notes here. No one seemed to raise a flag on this one. I think more than anything, we're bringing particular properties back into conformity. I think the other thing to me that's nice about this is it's limiting how far a building in the village commercial zone can be off the street. If you look at what I'll call the south end of Main Street, there are several properties that have parking in front, which create large curb cuts, so people are pulling out in front of potential pedestrians. This would limit that in the future. If someone wanted to develop, it wouldn't allow for parking in front of those specific buildings. So to me, this particular number one it's kind of a no-brainer to me.
I can also think of, sorry,
Go ahead.
2 sites in the single-family residential of 2 buildings that have burned that could potentially be redeveloped at any time, and to give them an easy way to develop in a way that's contiguous with the rest of the neighborhood makes a lot of sense.
Instead of 30 feet back.
Yeah.
Or asking for a variance.
Yep, I agree.
Is there any further discussion?
I'm ready for a vote.
Ready for a vote? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Abstentions? Okay, it passes, and this one goes to ballot on the Tuesday in February.
March.
March?
Isn't it?
March. What's the date? I have it written down here, actually. March 14th, sorry. March 14th, sorry. My wrong. March 14th. And town meeting's March 15th.
Better early than late.
Yes.
I would move that we put the proposed changes of Article 4, Section 402 to the voters.
Do we want to make any changes or no?
I'm going to propose it as is.
Okay.
Second.
Oh. So I would like to amend my motion.
Okay.
Sorry. I would like to insert the language so that it reads, except that for any lot within the village commercial district with frontage on Main Street.
Okay, thank you.
I need somebody to resecond my amendment. Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second to put forward this amendment with the change of clarifying village commercial. Is there any further discussion?
I've got discussion. Go ahead,
Mark?
I think I'm actually more concerned about this one. I've thought about it since the last meeting a little bit, and I did at the last meeting ask Joseph if we actually had the heights of the building on Main Street. I don't think we have right now a full record of that, correct?
That's correct, only in stories.
Yeah, and I brought this up at the last meeting. My concern with this is, in theory, because some of the heights on the west side, or some of the buildings on the west side potentially could add a new floor to those buildings.
East side?
Yeah, sorry, east side. Concern over those floors being turned into extra residential units has me concerned. And why is that? As many people mentioned, parking is a big concern downtown. My understanding, it seems like there's some debate, my understanding is that there is no requirement for those housing units in the village commercial zone. So if we add additional apartments, chances are most of the people are going to have a vehicle or two. So you're further restricting the parking downtown. So because of that, I would just ask the board to reconsider this article.
Okay. Mike, did you have a?
Yeah, for the same reasons. I'm concerned about the west side having much smaller buildings, and I don't think we thought this through. And it could be after the HOP grant, this might be, and they could tweak it in just the right way. There's some good elements to it, to what has been proposed here, but I think it's going to be confusing for the HOP grant to go with what was prior, what was now that no one's acted on, and it's just going to make the process more cumbersome. And I just don't think we did our I don't think we completed the process on analyzing this. There's been a lot of concern in the public and the parking. I just don't think we're ready to go, because you put this in front of the public and we put a little quick 2 or 3 sentences on before they say yes or no. And depending on how you word that, it can be great, and I'd vote for it. But this really takes a lot of thought to even know that one side's gaining and one side of the road is losing. So I would say we should table this and put some more thought into it and bring it back, and just bring it back at some point.
I think we should also table it. I think Mr. Kent made a good point. We need to define what Main Street is. And just looking at both sides of the street, I just don't think we put enough thought into it again.
Was the clarification I offered in the amendment not enough to clarify what Main Street was in your mind?
I just,
To define it as within the commercial district?
it does
Or
for,
with the village
it does for me,
Yeah,
but I'm just not sure that it would be clear for everyone.
okay.
And I think that, I just think it deserves more attention, just by the lay of the land out there.
And also the fact that the town attorney hasn't looked at it, and making that change, even though it clarifies, it substantially changes, and it would require renoticing at this point. So for those reasons, I think it really does need to be tabled.
I am personally of the opinion, and the attorney could probably answer that better than I can, that this would not need to be re-notified. This is the conversation we've been having, and it's a clarification of the boundaries of a change that we were already proposing. And you know, if the town attorney said that's too big of a change, then it could still be pulled at the next meeting. But I would leave that up to the attorney to tell us that we've overstepped if that is in fact the case. It doesn't seem like it to me. There is a little bit of wiggle room in interpretation, but of, you know, what a substantive change is.
I think you're gonna look at one side of the road, you're opening yourselves up to lawsuits, and I think you need to get the public engagement first.
Where is the ordinance? This is number 2, right? Height of any building shall be greater than 35 feet measured to average finished grade on there. Okay, I'm just wondering if there's any, we talked about the, giving either option as well for measuring.
To me, I think that gets a little too
confusing?
loosey-goosey and
Okay.
not, and I think it's
Less
clear
clear.
to me, it's clear to me we've always been talking about the village commercial. That to me is a point of clarification in this. I think to do anything beyond that would be changing it.
Yeah, okay.
And in my interpretation, I think even on the west side of the street where the potential would be to reduce the potential building height, I don't think any of the existing buildings are going to be made non-conforming because they're almost all flat from front to back anyway. So, you know, I see very little potential negative impact to the existing buildings.
And if we're talking about character, which is part of what's in our master plan as well, it would, by defining the facades of a certain height as a maximum on Main Street, you're also defining the character of Main Street closer to historical downtown Main Street area.
And alternatively, if someone really wanted to take advantage of the current zoning, they could find a lot that has a 50-foot height elevation from the front to the back, and if they push the building almost to the back, they could build a 25, so if it's 50 feet higher in the back and you take the average, they could build 25 plus 35, they could build a 60-foot tall building on Main Street as we currently allow in our current zoning. So my feeling is limiting it to 35 feet from Main Street on both sides provides kind of a more uniform experience along Main Street, whereas somebody could potentially build a 60-foot building according to our current zoning.
That's a very good point.
Any further discussion?
I just think the late discussion that we're having just shows that there's just too much that we don't know. And I don't think there's anything pressing that can't wait for another year or 18 months for the HOP study grant to really get into this whole topic. And the fact that the town attorney hasn't looked at it first.
What's the time, contract length for the HOP grant?
It's
It's
done.
officially until the late spring of 2024, although we hope to have a lot of the work done by earlier in spring to be ready with amendments for the 2024 zoning amendment season. So in fact, some of the amendments would be in by late this year.
So we're looking at a minimum of 2 years for any recommendations for.
No, actually,
No, next
no,
year.
we're actually looking for recommendations to come in by late this year
Okay.
for next year's. And officially, the timeline can run a little bit over that, and there might be some kind of cleaning up housework to do after that.
But any amendments are going to be right up against the limit.
So we're a year out,
So
right?
we're going to be in the same situation with a short time schedule next year, even if we get recommendations
Yes,
from
it'll
the
be 2
housing
years.
grant. So my point is that any concerns about amendments, proposed amendments coming to the board this year on a late schedule is kind of out the window if you're willing to look at it next year.
Right, it would be 2 years, 18 months for the HOP study.
I think there will be, the public engagement piece is a really important component of it, so
I
there
agree.
should be a little bit more engagement, not necessarily about the amendments specifically, but more input into the process.
Yes.
Then we're able to manage as now a staff of one and a
Right.
volunteer board.
I agree and that's a really good point, because this is part of her job, is to get out there and engage everybody on these issues.
I think as a board and as volunteers, we're doing the best we can to spread the word.
I agree.
I think that there's certainly things that I've seen other towns do that share board meeting agendas and emails and things like that. That would be great if we could figure out a system to do that in Plymouth, so at least agendas are going out. But I think for this board, I know I'm at capacity for how much I can serve, so.
Yes.
I know that with the question and answer that you got left at your desk from Stephanie Verdile from the State Office of Planning, who basically is there for a resource for town boards, has advised against passing some of these proposed zone, because we haven't had the town attorney look at it. And she says, as I said above, as a planner, I would not send anything to a public hearing without having the town attorney review it for legal correctness first. You would be wasting time and money if you held public hearings, and after the hearings, the town attorney made substantial changes to the amendment. Then you have to hold additional public hearings. I don't know if we've been well-served
So,
preparing for this.
Yeah.
No offense to Joseph, because
Actually, Joseph, would you like to speak?
yeah, and I apologize, I might have mentioned this earlier. So the town attorney, after the last meeting, did take a look at the proposed amendments, and he offered an input into, and I should look and clarify, but he offered comments on particularly the one amendment related to parking, and he suggested thinking about definitions of, clarifying definitions on that, and he also advised about substantial changes. So he advised that, those have to do with, the impact on the ground of the amendment versus small tweaks. So those were the two pieces of advice that the town's attorney had after reviewing this.
So most of it passed the,
That was his
Yeah.
comment.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any further discussion about this potential amendment?
one other thing, if we make changes to a potential amendment, it would have to be renoticed. And that was an answer from Stephanie. Should the prudent procedure be to table at this point due to lack of discussion? It sounds as though 2 public hearings were scheduled for the amendment. So if changes need to be made to the amendment, they can be made at the first public hearing. The amendment will then be renoticed, reflecting the changes, and then discussed at the second public hearing. We haven't made changes, we did it at the second.
Dependent upon the types of changes. A clarifying change as opposed to a substantive change is allowed.
So we're removing most of the town that this would apply to, or some of Main
We're
Street.
better reflecting all the discussions we've been having until now about this particular.
And that's debatable whether it's a clarifying word.
My
or
motion
if
stands.
Can we move the question?
Yes, so we have a movement and a second to move this amendment forward. Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Oppose.
Did you vote?
I vote aye. Abstentions?
4-3.
I think it's 4-3. Joseph, is that what you,
Yes, so
You want to do it by hand?
yeas
should we
were-
do a roll vote?
Sure.
Okay. Mike?
Nay.
Nay.
Neil?
Aye.
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 Nay.
4-3.
It's the most exciting vote I've ever seen on this board.
All your years.
Okay, so the vote passes, and we will move this to the vote on.
I would like to move changes to Article 4, Section 409, dealing with keeping chickens in the single-family residential zone.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move forward Article 4, 409, keeping chickens. Is there further discussion?
Only that this is the best amendment I think we have on our list. It's my favorite one of these personally.
I make a motion that we adopt and send to town vote for Article 4, Section 409, criteria for keeping chickens in the single-family residential zone.
We just had a motion and a second, no?
Did I miss it?
Yeah.
I think so.
Sorry.
Any
Now we have
further,
a third.
Yeah.
Have another vote.
is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion is passed.
I apologize if I'm making all the motions. Mike, do you want to do the next one?
I make a motion that we adopt Article 7, floodplain development, that we send it to town vote.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move forward Article 7, floodplain development to town vote. Further discussion?
I don't think there's any further discussion on this
Just
one.
just checking.
Yeah. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Article 12, Section 1204.3D, criteria for special exceptions for off-site parking facilities. If I may actually speak as chair on this one. As we've looked closer at this, there seem to be a whole bunch of places, and we've all had some discussions about this, where our parking criteria in our zoning ordinance is unclear, needs tweaking, and seems to even be almost contradictory in places. And while I agree that I think this change to our special exception criteria is a move in the right direction, I think it might be even more beneficial to look next year at a more holistic approach to looking at our parking regulations in the zoning ordinance and finding inconsistencies, finding places where we're making this better. And so I'm going to propose, I'm not going to make a motion, but propose that we might want to table this one for now. I will also say, by putting it on our agenda and having it at these public hearings, we have got some fantastic input about what might work and not work in this. And if we are looking for engaged early input, by putting it on our agenda, we got that. And we got some really great input, which, in my personal opinion, as a member of this board, I think could inform some really wonderful discussions for next year, including discussions that come out of the housing study. That would be where I'm kind of falling on this.
I'll offer a motion that we table Article 7, that's 12. 12. Section 1204.3.3.d, special exception criteria for off-site parking until
I don't know if we need to give it a term.
after this, well,
Table it. I'll second it.
I wanted to read the,
A motion and a second to table the off-site parking special exception. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. It will be tabled and hopefully lead to some really good discussions for the next round.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to the town vote, Article 12, Section 1204.3.g, accessory family dwelling.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for accessory family dwelling being removed as an amendment. Is there further discussion?
This is just
I
cleaning
know.
up something that we
Just checking.
we just left behind. That I think we found another one.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Got one more.
I would like to make a motion that we move to public or town vote, Article 12, Section 1204.4, variance criteria.
Second.
We have a motion and a
Sue got that one.
second for the variance criteria. Discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And the motion passes. All right, thank you all.
We're not done yet.
No, we're not done, but we're done with that part of the meeting.
Yeah. I just need to stand up.
If I can find my, oh, there we are, okay.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Thank
public
you.
comment.
Thank you very much.
I suggest that state planning recommends that the zoning board meet with the planning board, and that would be a great thing that has not happened in years.
Actually, we did it last year, and hopefully we can do it again this year. But last
happen a
winter, I
lot.
think, we did it, right?
2 years ago?
Was it two?
It was just last year.
Like, just last year.
No, I wasn't, no.
I think it was the meeting where I
You
think
weren't
you
there,
actually
but
were.
we did do it. Yeah.
It was invited, I think you weren't.
Okay.
On Zoom.
I was gone at the time.
I think you were on.
Oh, you
I wasn't
you may have been on
available
Zoom or something, yeah.
My fault.
Okay. But I do agree, thank you for the reminder. I'm going to write a note to myself
Thank you.
to do that again.
Do.
It was like one of your first chairing.
It was, actually. I think, yeah. Like one of my first chairing roles, like, let's have a joint meeting.
Yeah. And who's in charge of this one?
Exactly. All right, so our second public hearing relates to the Jeff Hiltz Frontenac Development
Continuation.
continuation of a public hearing from last meeting. And I believe at this point, we have heard from Jeff Hiltz. He's not online, is he?
I'm not sure. I do not see him online
Okay.
now.
So I believe we do not have any further information, and he has communicated to us that he'd like to continue this again to February.
That's too bad. Yeah, that's correct. He gave a call to town staff this morning and said that he would like to request the board extend consideration to February 16th meeting due to some delays he's had internally, but I'm not sure if he was planning on attending or not.
Okay. So we do have a public hearing scheduled, and I'm not certain if anyone is here for that public hearing. So I would still like to hear members of the public, and since you came out, and hopefully Jeff Hiltz will be able to get this as well and hear these words. So do any members of the board have anything to say before we hold a public hearing?
I just have a question about, have we gotten anything more from, and I wasn't here in December, so if I'm missing something, but just water and sewer and the state of that system?
They had sent a letter, which was included with the board packet a few meetings ago, and then I do understand that a meeting occurred between them and some of the homeowners. I'm not aware of anything further at this point.
Great, thank you.
All right, it is 8:03, and I'll open the public hearing. And if any members of the public would like to speak, come up and identify yourself and take a few minutes to speak.
Hi, Sharon DeMarco, One Point of View, Plymouth. This gentleman, Mr. Hiltz, is supposed to be the developer of this entire area. It just seems like we are chasing our tails in a circle up there as residents. As residents, we have pooled together our resources. Some people are going to town meetings with water department. Some people are being asked to get their own attorneys. It is turning into a circus. And Mr. Hiltz decides at the very last minute, as he had mentioned today, to have it continued. He has had ample time to present the boards with the necessary information. I don't know what his issue is, and I really don't care at this point. All I know is we are having issues with water. We are having issues with storage department. We are having issues with select boards, planning boards. Mr. Hiltz wants to dump his issues off on us. As homeowners, we are not going to continue like this for months and months and months without any solution or any point of reference other than hire your own attorney. People went to a water and sewer meeting, and Mr. Don Jutton told them that he suggests everyone to get an attorney. I don't feel like spending my money on an attorney when I pay the town of Plymouth an unbelievable amount of property tax. I'm a business owner in town. I have rental property, and I have a residential property. Mr. Hiltz has not cooperated or has not followed through with anything. As-built development, he moves things around willy-nilly as he feels is just, and then figures no one's going to hold him accountable. Well, at some point, I'd like to know, does he have a bond on this road? Does he have a bond on the development? I have different opinions. Some people say the town of Plymouth has nothing to hold him accountable. So if Mr. Hiltz decides to walk away from this project and his sewer lines, which we all had to pay to have our own pumps, these fancy-dancy procedures done with our sewage, they are advertising town sewage, town water, which is false advertisement by the realtors, and silly us, we bought into it, okay? He's got his money from all of us. I want him held accountable.
Thank you. Sorry for your troubles.
Yeah, it's extremely frustrating. And I'm getting letters from his attorneys that he's going to sue me, and he's going to, put a lien on the property and X, Y, and Z. And I've tried to be very accommodating, saying, I'm not answering a lawsuit at this point. I'm not hiring an attorney at $300 or $400 an hour to come to these meetings, when I can certainly do that. But I would like some direction for myself and other people up there that own property, and there's quite a few of us up there that are really in a dilemma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, hopefully out of this process, we'll get, if the goal of this process is to get more documentation of all these things, many of the things you're talking about.
Well, obviously he wasn't held accountable in the beginning.
Are there further comments?
Yeah, my name's Daniel Hurd. So I don't live up here yet, but I'm starting a build, lot 16 on Ski Lift Lane. So for me, I'm coming up here thinking this is going to be a place where I'm going to come in and, hopefully live the rest of my life up here. And now I'm starting this process and this adventure by sitting here talking to you. Because the last time I watched the last board meeting and was, very concerned about what was going on and about what we had found in just trying to look at the subdivision and see how things were going and what we needed to do. So I'll give you a little bit of what I'm going through, because there is no as-built per the spec, and it's per what the requirements and regulations are. So I did not find my sewer tie-ins. I did, however, have Mr. Hiltz come to the property yesterday, give my builder a helping hand, trying to find some of these things, and still was not able to find them. Still was not able to find electrical conduits. I had NHEC come out 3 times, and today we finally found everything. So we didn't find the sewer tie-ins, but we had, with Mr. Hiltz's blessing, the main was sitting on my side of the road, was able to tie into the actual main and get that situation under control. I had NHEC come out again today with another company to come in and trace my lines from the vault all the way to my property to find out where they were. So I've had to do all that. When I got a survey done back 4 and 5 months ago, we found out that we had encroachments from my neighbors because lot lines nobody knows what the real lot lines are, and so that's another issue and another expense to me. I mean, I probably spent $5,000 just trying to find my sewer tie-in and electrical tie-ins. My problem with all this is that I don't want somebody else coming up here and trying to build a house and not knowing where anything is, and they are now assuming the cost. At some point in time, the planning board, the city, should have said, hey, we've got to stop this development and make sure that we are looking at this and seeing what needs to be done at phases. I mean, I can't have Scott come by as an inspector and I've already built my whole house, and he goes, oh, I'm here to see your foundation, and it's covered up, or my electrical, I've already put drywall. What would the town make me do? It would make me uncover everything and show them all the ins and outs. I'm not saying that Mr. Hiltz is 100% at fault here now, and it's because this has been going on so long that the planning board, the selectmen, whoever should have been making sure that these things were accomplished when they were being done. And if they weren't, saying, look, we need to put a stop to this immediately and protect the residents and the people that are buying up there. And at some point in time, you've got to say, I can't wash my hands from this anymore, but I have got to protect these citizens from what Mr. Hiltz has done. I did go up to the office today, pull off a lot of paperwork. I'm going to take some of them home, read through them, see what all I can find. One of the things that was first on the page is said that this town, that for this to be approved, it needed to have a bond, or it needed to have an irrevocable letter of credit. And I don't think that's been found. And so my question is this development even, is it actually supposed to be done? Because if it's not being done by what the letter says, who's at fault? Who's at fault at letting this continue on? And so my question is for you, and a comment to y'all is, at some point in time, you've got to start protecting your residents up there and the people that are going to be moving in there, so that we are not having to do this all on our own, and that we're not having to come in here and make sure that Mr. Hiltz or that the planning board or that the city is not at fault. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have a commenter on Zoom who would like to speak. Dan Marion.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Marion, 18 Point of View Drive. Got a quick question. Back on, I think, October 25th, there were staff members and town folks up along with Mr. Hiltz inspecting the roadways, inspecting all the different facets of the development. And from that inspection, there were 2 punch lists, one made by the town, I believe that June made that punch list, and one made by your engineer. From those 2 punch lists combined, there's probably about 12 items or so. Of those 12 items, can someone tell me how many have been completed and checked off and which ones are outstanding?
As far as what has been provided to the select board through the town engineer, I can't speak. I don't know if there have been any updates on that front. We have not, the town memo as far as the planning, this is the sort of that process here, but I do not know offhand as far as the engineering memo from Mike McNally that was presented to the select board.
Okay.
I suspect that most of those issues were issues that can only be dealt with by the select board. The issues that were relevant to planning were brought to us, and we are still waiting for the developer's response to those.
Okay, so right now there's really nothing that's been marked off as finished and complete at this time.
Well, not that we on this board know about, which is not to say they haven't been done, but
we don't have that information.
So just to be clear, what we need as a board is to make sure that we need to approve the changes that have been made since the original subdivision was approved in, was that 2001?
Well, there were 3 phases of approvals over the years,
so we need to
which
make
is
sure
challenging.
we need to approve the as-built so that what's up there meets.
Is recorded.
It's recorded, yeah.
So that's the role that we play in that.
And we could, in fact, have asked for 3 separate as-builts for the phases, but we're asking for one final as-built. Yeah.
And we have not received that.
Not yet.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there further comments?
But the question is, I'm gonna get back up here. My question is I know the as-bills are not there, and if they're not going to be, at what point in time do you take this over and say, hey, this is partly our fault, and at what point in time do you protect the citizens and the residents up there? I realize that it's Mr. Hiltz's development, and Mr. Hiltz should have made sure that the as-bills were getting accomplished and getting done as they went and did this, but they didn't, and as the town that you didn't as well. So at some point in time that should have been done. 2006, 2007, when it was being built.
So there are several hands in this process. There's the planning board and our role to kind of govern the process and make sure that plans that are put forward meet our criteria. And then there's the actual compliance with those plans, which does not fall on the planning board until a moment like this when we're simply asking for the as-built of what got built. But we're not out there at the planning board doing inspections and stuff like that.
So who does that?
That would be the inspector.
Well, the select board.
Well, the select board
supervises that.
The select board supervises it, and you have the inspector actually, and engineers and others who are hired by the town to.
Some of the inspections would be done by the town engineer through the planning process, but
Doesn't as-bills happen prior? Can I?
You may.
I don't know, they want us to fix the water lines for 50 grand.
I have a question. As a board, the planning board, in other towns I've lived in, the planning board is the first stage. You receive your engineering, you received your as-built plans for development, so forth and so on. The selectmen, if there's questions that they need approval on, they deal with the developer. I would like to know how this process got so non-attentive by the town of Plymouth. I have a person who came out who gave me a building permit. A lot of my neighbors have building permits. A lot of my neighbors, me included, have an occupancy permit. That's telling me that the town of Plymouth has said, we are all set, you can occupy this residence. Apparently, that is not true.
So I'm not sure anyone on the planning board really has the authority to.
So where, what I'm looking to you to ask, where do we go and what do we do?
Okay, hang on, guys. So, we are, all right. The question at hand is the road acceptance. That's what brought all of this to our attention. Road
That's right.
acceptance policy is the purview, and we have some sort of RSA that allows for this, or state or town statute.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Not yet.
Does the town of Plymouth have a bond on that road?
Can I finish,
Let's let
please?
Rebecca finish, please.
Go ahead.
So the punch list that was mentioned, these things that need to happen, and I think some of this is finding the water and sewer connections. That's the purview of the select board.
Okay.
So that's, building inspection, road acceptance. That is the select board's responsibility. Our job is to make sure, so this development went through 3 phases for a site plan review. So.
Or subdivision, but yeah.
Sorry, subdivision. And so this board, and I don't think anyone who's sitting here was on that board when that happened.
I'm sure it wasn't.
So that process it precedes all of us. But there was a site plan, and now as the town is going forward with trying to accept the roads up there as a public town road, that's when, okay, the as-built, or what's actually existing there, doesn't match what we had approved as a board in, 21 years ago. So we're trying to reconcile that as a board. That's the role that this board has.
Okay.
And as for the bond, I'm not totally sure about this. I can tell you what we do now. If we were to see a subdivision, that there would be some sort of performance guarantee. And what else we said? The, engineering, what are the other things we do?
Retainers for engineers.
Yeah, retainers for engineers, so that stuff is all being held until the conditions are met in the subdivision.
Because it holds the developer's feet
holds
to the
the develop-
fire,
yeah.
basically.
We had a bond.
You did.
You told us.
We had evidence of that at the last meeting.
You guys
Okay.
do have a bond.
So it's not.
It may have been released because it may have been completed.
And we can't really speak to that on this board.
So what, as a group of residents, how do we go about putting closure to this? Do we meet with the selectmen board?
I think the select board, I don't know, Neil, you want to speak to this, but the select board is where a lot of this is going to happen.
I spent the
We're
last-
trying to close out our own process and get the as-built, which will be helpful for the select board in
But
their
you still
process.
haven't got them.
No.
So-
But ultimately, when it comes to acceptance of the road and actual compliance with that checklist, I think we're talking about a select board process.
I spent the last 10 years trying to get a handle on this issue, and I don't want to go into specifics, but I will say that the current select board is determined to have a final resolution to this problem as soon as possible. And I believe that Mr. Hiltz has a legitimate reason for not being here tonight that I can't reveal it. But I have faith that he is going to continue to work with us to find a resolution.
Go ahead, Bill.
So in general, if we were to get a subdivision proposal tonight
Yes.
for a new subdivision with a road, the road would be private by definition
Yes.
until it's accepted by the town.
Yes, I understand that process completely.
I believe the same is true for the water and sewer. I don't think those water and sewer systems that were installed were ever, if there is a process for Plymouth Village Water and Sewer to adopt those, that's with them. That's not anything that they're their own entity. They're distinct even from the administration of the town. So if you're asking for Plymouth Village Water and Sewer to adopt those lines, that may have been something that the developer may have needed to build to a certain specification. If he didn't do that at the time, if there were specifications that he didn't build at the time because it was his intention to maintain them as a private system, that may be one of the things that the homeowners may have to take up. But if that was the case, he should have clearly defined that in some form of covenants.
So we're looking at three separate entities, basically. We're looking at water and sewer, we're looking at selectmen, and we're looking at planning board, correct?
Selectmen and planning are both part of the town.
Okay. The water and sewer is separate.
Planning is simply, we have the ability to approve the site plan or changes, the subdivision or changes to the subdivision plan. That's the extent of our...
So it really falls then on the selectmen, I'm assuming?
All 100% of enforcement for that falls with the selectmen.
Okay. So why are we at this meeting?
Well, we do have a public hearing because part of the process is the planning board giving final approval to the as-built that reflect all the changes that have been made since the original approvals. And what that will also give is a tool for the select board to better judge what's there and to be able to protect all the taxpayers and everyone in town, so the town doesn't take upon something it doesn't understand and it's going to become a liability.
I understand that completely as a taxpayer, completely.
Mike?
So I brought this question up to Stephanie Verdile with the state office, and she is basically said, why is it going through the subdivision process again for road acceptance? That's what she's asking us, because there is a big question.
Did you present to her the fact that there were changes that weren't part of the plan?
Yep. Okay. And there are 3 changes that the planning board asked to bring to the planning board to identify, as I understand it, for the select board. It's the select board's decision whether to accept the road or not. It's not the planning board's decision.
Got it.
So we asked for 3 things. There were 3 things we asked for. The cistern got relocated with the permission of the fire chief at the time. We asked for a location of an encroachment of a stone wall. And we asked for, show us on the maps, the change from a hammerhead to a circle. Am I right? Or is it a circle to hammerhead?
Yeah.
And we asked for those three things. Jeff brought that to the planning board, identified it on the plans, and then the planning board, or the planner, said, well, we have a whole lot more information we're going to need from you. And Kevin French explained, there's been at least 3 surveyors working on this subdivision from the beginning since 2001. If you requiring me to go back and verify all of that, not only would it be quite expensive, because I'm not going to put my surveyor stamp relying on what past surveyors have done. He's not going to do that.
So just to clarify, though, what we asked for were as-built as per our regulations, which include all that stuff that we were asking for. That was not there in the plans he gave us last time. And this is all information that is necessary for the next step of the process anyway, as the select board tries to approve this road potentially. So we actually have documentation, the town does, of all this stuff that could be a liability if it's not documented.
So at that meeting where Jeff came in with those 3 items, that is when June said, well, we have our subdivision regulations you got to go through. That's where we stated we needed a lot more information. And basically the town, the people in the subdivision just want their road accepted so they can have the town services. For anybody thinking of coming to Plymouth and putting in single-family homes, because that's what we desperately need, they're going to think twice after they see what the process is. The process is the select board, and the select board with the town engineer and the town attorney settling this. Waiting weeks and weeks and weeks through the planning process is not the way. And Stephanie has made several suggestions, all centering around this needs to be the attorney, this needs to be the select board. Why is it here for the planning board? And I've never seen this happen quite this way. And
did you share that letter, Mike?
We need to go through the process the town has on how we accept roads, and I just don't see this as part of it.
I just want to make sure this. I do want you to speak. I also just want to remind us all that we can get bogged down in this conversation for the next 3 hours.
Right.
It is a complicated process. It is a process that ultimately is aimed at protecting the taxpayers and the residents of this town. And it does seem difficult at this point, but the ultimate goal is to take over the road, hopefully. It's not,
But I, again, as a taxpayer, wouldn't want the town of Plymouth to take over something sight unseen if you don't know the particulars.
And that's what we're talking about here, yes.
Exactly. So it's a double sword here, double jeopardy.
Yeah, I think that this, I really feel for everybody up there, and this is, and we're not trying to give you the runaround or delay this process or anything. It's really unfortunate that things have gotten to this point, and I know it's probably no comfort for you to say, well, we've learned a lot from this and we're not going to do it going forward. It's...
I don't want to learn anymore.
Yeah, it's, I get
Learn
that
it
this
enough.
is a really tough situation, and we're doing everything we can to make sure, what we can do as a planning board, that we're going to get this plan to a place that fits our regulations, can get filed with the county, can get filed in the basement here, and they can go to the select board so they can make an informed decision to help support the residents there and help protect the town and all the residents.
So you're telling me this step is, he's responsible for giving you the information that you requested as a board, then you will forward that to the selectmen's board, correct?
Well, we don't directly forward that necessarily.
Or however you do
Once
it.
it's recorded or documented, then
Then when do they pick this ball up?
those are checked off as checklists.
So you check it all off,
We don't
and
set
then
the
what?
select board's agenda.
No, I'm saying, where does it go? How do we proceed? How do we move forward?
Once the planning board gets the as-built and the planning board is satisfied with what's there and it's all, they've approved it all, then it goes to him, it's approved, and it's up, I believe it's up to him to go back to the select board and say, I have the planning board's blessing, now what do you want me to do?
Okay,
So
that's
that
what I
list-
need to know.
That list that the select board has, that's when they start trying to get that satisfied.
And just,
if it's not already.
and just to clarify one thing, the planning board's blessing is that Jeff Hiltz has satisfied our needs as a board.
That's what I mean, the regular,
Which is
all
not,
that we have to go
which is
by.
not an endorsement necessarily to the select board to actually go ahead with this. Yeah.
Now I'm confused again.
So basically, we just need to say, the plan meets what we need to be able to fulfill our duties.
Okay.
Yeah. So we need to make a determination, which would be a vote, that's, okay, the plans that he gave us fit our site plan regulations.
And there's a lot of parallels between what
And then
we
it goes
need
back
and what the select board needs.
Okay, so my last question is, how long in an estimate of time are we looking at? 6 months, 3 months, a year, 5 years?
We don't control the schedule. It's up to Mr. Hiltz.
Depends on when he gets his stuff.
So what happens if he never gives you this stuff?
He maintains it in perpetuity as a private road.
And just to answer one other thing, the town of Plymouth has already approved his subdivision. It's been approved, it's done. It's a matter of whether the select board is ready to accept the road. And I don't even know whether the town attorney has been brought in on this. I'm not sure to what extent, but that's the avenue.
He knows because
Yeah, I
I
would
retained him out of John Radican. I retained him as a lawyer for the encroachment issue that I had when I surveyed, not knowing that he was part of Plymouth, the town.
Whoa.
And so
That's a conflict.
now we have an issue here because he's also been looking at this encroachment issue on this subdivision up here.
Well, we can't,
No, I realize that, but I'm just saying that he is aware of it because we've told him about it. And he said, and as soon as we told him about it, he said, I need to call June. And so now everybody knows what's really going on up here, and he does sort of know what's going on.
So I mean, I just say I thank you for all your input and understand your frustration, and the hearing is going to end up being continued again, and we want to resolve this, but we do need certain information. And thank you all for your input. Are there any further comments from the public on Zoom or face-to-face? No? Okay, so it is 8:33, and I'll continue this hearing to the
February 16th?
17?
Sorry, Joseph, what's the date?
It was 16, I think you said?
Yes, February 16th is.
February 16th.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Oh, that's 2022.
All right. Thank you all.
Last year.
Mr. McGinley?
So at this point, we have two conceptual consultations. The first one from Mike McGinley. So it's a reminder to everyone, this is not a site plan review. This is just a conceptual consultation, more of an informational meeting.
Non-binding.
Non-binding, thank you. And if the applicant wishes to pursue approval for the project, we'll have to go through the site plan review process. Good evening, and thank you for your patience.
Handouts just to make things easier for you to see each one of those. And then I've got an easel as well with a larger version of some of the drawings. I don't know where you want me to locate it. You want just over here or? Sure.
Where is the camera going to see it, I think is.
I could probably look on with him.
Probably the easiest place to pop it down would be like right here. Thank you.
My understanding is that the other hotel that we have is always full, so.
Mike knows what he's doing.
You want it just right in front here or over to the side?
Oh, you have a stand, I see.
Yeah. You want it over
So
here? I mean, it's duplicate material for what you've got in front of you.
Okay, so it's all duplicate of what we already have?
Yeah.
So maybe someplace where any members of the public can actually see it a bit better then. Actually, if you're going to be pointing at it, maybe so we can all, yeah.
Future.
Anybody have any good input on this?
Just for there.
I mean, I would just put them.
Future development. And have two buildings. To be determined, to develop for somebody else.
I've got a copy somewhere if you need.
This is right across from the
I think one of the later ones has the bank on there.
This is McDonald's. Stops.
McDonald's. Yes. That makes a lot of sense having a road going, you know.
All right, welcome.
All right, thank you. Thank you, board. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you tonight and sort of introduce this project in a conceptual consultation. My name's David Sherborne. I'm an architect and vice president at Opeachy Construction. We're located in Belmont, New Hampshire. We're a design build contractor. We've designed and built over 50 hotels throughout New England. And we're teaming up again with Mike McGinley, who's here tonight as well, as the landowner of Riverside Landing, and specifically talking about a potential new hotel next to the Fairfield Inn and Suites at Riverside Landing. If you go to page 2 there, you'll see the sort of overall master plan of Riverside Landing, and tonight we're going to introduce the next phase 2 of that development. And so if you look at that plan, on the northern portion of the site, phase 2 sort of connects behind the Bank of New Hampshire building. There's a roadway connection there, and so phase 2 will be a continuation of that road with the proposed hotel on the northern portion of that site, almost sort of in a similar proximity to Tenny Mountain Highway as the existing hotel. In front of it to the south will be a future building pad site that's to be determined what that'll be. There's also designated just east of that larger building pad site a 4,000 square foot building pad site, and then all the way to the east is an additional smaller building pad. Tonight we want to sort of get into the first real project as part of this phase 2 development, and that's a new hotel, which is a Home2 Suites. That's a Hilton hotel. It's an extended stay hotel, so it differentiates a little bit from the Fairfield Inn and Suites. It's an extended stay, which means it has a kitchen in every guest room and a small workspace as well, and so it's sort of targeted more to slightly more extended stays, sort of 5+ days at times, and it can be desirable even for families on vacation. That gives them the ability to have additional amenities within the hotel itself. If we look at page 3 there with the color site plan, gives you, I think, a little clearer description of sort of navigation into the site behind the Bank of New Hampshire building and that road connection. At the west portion of the hotel will be the porte cochere and main entry into the hotel itself. We're currently proposing the hotel to be 95 rooms and 100 parking spaces associated with it. And if we look at page 3, there's a sort of small general description of the hotel itself. So 95 guest rooms, 3 stories, will be compliant with the 35-foot height requirements. Building footprint is a little under 19,000 square feet. Total area of 56,000 square feet. And so very similar in terms of scale and footprint of the existing hotel that's next door. Similar guest amenities. There's going to be an indoor swimming pool, outdoor patio on the northern side of the hotel. There'll be a fitness room, and then sort of food and beverage services with breakfast service and a market area within the lobby. We're early days here with the design of the hotel, and we just wanted to get in front of you, but on page 3 and 4 of the handout, and what I can do is actually look at the pages here as well. It's taking a look at what a home 2 suite would look like. The main point of difference here with this the photos you see, what we end up designing for the site is these all depict 4 stories. It'll be 3 stories, but in terms of massing and articulation, it's very similar to what we would propose to do. Like every Hilton and Marriott product, there's very strong branding and elements that they like to see to put their name on it, but you know, there's some variations in color and some articulation, but this is generally the path that we would like to proceed down with the exterior of the building. Page 4 is really just a continuation, but just sort of sample photos of a prototype interior of the building. That one would typically not really vary, other than there may be some tweaks and sort of adjacencies and size of those spaces, but this paints a picture of the direction we'd like to go. We appreciate the opportunity to get some feedback from you, and that will hopefully steer us in a smooth path forward to come back with a full site plan application and get it approved. It's the same development team with Mike as Landover, the same owner and operator of the hotel adjacent to this proposed site, and really happy for any feedback that you can offer us tonight, and we're hoping to break ground this year sometime.
Okay, thank you. Members of the board have any questions, comments? Rebecca?
Mr. McGinley will be surprised to hear this, but we've talked about this with every development through here, is just make sure there's contiguous sidewalks throughout the property, because especially with an extended stay, I mean, there's a liquor store, McDonald's, a bank, a market basket that are all, you know, obviously Tenny Mountains Highway is not safe to walk on, but the more we can ensure that it's as safe as possible within that site, that's something we've always asked for since this property started getting developed. So.
Yeah, fully understandable.
I'm also kind of curious, like, this is a broader question about the bigger plan, I suppose, but as we start to think about specific businesses and automobile circulation, there's the, I think, proposed new drive, which is probably not as capable in terms of the traffic arrangement there and the various intersections and lack of light and whatever, of handling a lot of traffic versus the already existing intersection. I'm just kind of, I don't have a specific question. I'm already thinking about like what traffic circulation looks like as businesses start to kind of appear on the site.
Yeah, and I think Mike can probably almost talk to that a little bit, but I think there's an understanding that there's a different arrangement there at the eastern part of that site and that cut onto Tenny Mountain Highway, and I think we're investigating what those implications are and what can be done to help mitigate any concerns exiting or entering off Tenny Mountain Highway. So we'll take that in consideration when we come back with the full site plan application and have a definitive answer on that.
Just say I think it'd be a welcome addition. I just know from my experience here in town and looking for rooms to rent for people coming from out of town, room rates here can be extremely expensive, so hopefully that could help with a little bit of that, being a little more open rooms, and it's also at times very hard to find an open room, so I think it's something that could really help out people in the town and people looking to visit.
I have a question about the structure that's shown kind of on the larger scale site plan. There's a parking, there's an entrance to the east with another structure there. Is that part of the hotel development? Is that a transformer pad or something along those lines?
Are you talking about far east of the side or near the hotel?
Sorry, it's on the second.
Be closer to the Dunkin'
first page of the
Donuts.
presentation.
I think the far east you're talking about, right?
Donuts would be right
Well,
close.
Duncan's over here, I think. It's this part.
Right, that'll be part of this phase 2 here, but it's not determined. We don't know what that'll be. Right?
Okay, it's to be determined.
That's to be
Could be a.
determined. So yeah, so this is sort of the introduction to the whole phase 2, but specifically sort of focusing in on the what will be going initially for.
That's just a potential development site. There's nothing
Correct.
proposed at this time. Okay. Mike?
I have a non-planning comment. Sometimes hotels that have a large pool might allow the public, the townspeople, to come after hours for a fee and use the pool. Not that that's anything you have to do, but...
No, and we can talk to the developer if that's something they're open to. I know down where we are in the Lakes region, there's a few hotels that offer that as well. So we can offer that up as something that they may want to do out of good faith or something for the community as well.
Anyone that wants to provide swimming lessons can make a hell of a business out of that hotel for you. Nowhere to get swimming lessons for kids in this town, so it's very hard.
This is the 13,000 square feet.
And I know you're both fairly experienced. Are there any questions for us about the process?
This is 4,000
I think,
square feet.
oh, can I say
Yeah,
something
yeah,
else?
Rebecca.
So we did just update our site plan regulations and we, with careful attention to design guidelines, stormwater and stuff like that. So, you know, that our expectations, I think, are revitalized and very clear in this new document, so.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you for reminding us, yeah.
Do you have any other questions for us?
No, not at all. We're excited to be in front of you, and we feel like this sort of dialogue early on just helps the process and makes it go smoothly. Fingers crossed.
We look forward to seeing a site plan. And
all right.
I think also from sitting through the entire evening tonight, you get a sense for why we ask for certain things.
Details.
Yeah.
I was going to say that we'll make sure we have good as-built at the end of it. So.
Yeah, 21 years later.
Yeah, so we're not giving an extra special gift to the planning board 20 years in the future.
I think it'll be a great addition.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
We have an hour and 15 minutes left. We have to shut it down.
You hear that, Mike?
You don't want
An hour.
I'm
All right. Next up, we have another conceptual consultation with Michael Bouchard and North Country Development.
So I am excusing myself here?
You may do so. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, this is a good sign.
Wow. Yeah, quite a team.
We brought in the young guns.
Good.
To set up the easels.
Good.
She had to wait a long time.
So I appreciate everyone's long night, and they had a tough night tonight. You know, it's not always easy on the planning boards in small town or big town America, you know, so.
Yeah, we appreciate your patience.
We're gonna try to make this as painless and positive as possible so you end on a good note and go home with a good feeling. Give us a couple seconds to set these up.
Sure.
For the folks in the audience, I'm gonna direct the slides towards the planning board, but we can flip them to you once I'm done. We'll have our wonderful assistants here.
Uh-oh. Oh, there you go. I was worried about Sue.
Hearing stuff back and forth and like Italian stuff from like.
my lovely assistant, Stephen Kelly Jr. Good everybody.
Evening.
So, first, by way of introduction, I'm Stephen Kelly, the new owner of Tenny Mountain, so great to meet you all, and looking forward to becoming a positive contributor to the community, and hopefully not have to deal with residents who are, developers who may not have done things the right way. By way of background, I don't know how much you do or don't know about me, but I own a couple $100 million general contracting firm in Massachusetts. We're ranked in the top 20 in the whole state of Mass, and we won Boston Business Journal's best places to work for our company size this year, which will just show you that we're not that type of developer who doesn't do a good job, and we take great pride in what we do. Our mantra is actually exceptional, no exceptions. I also have another company, a telecommunication company, does work all throughout New Hampshire, Timberline Communications, all throughout New England, really. So, Michael and I met several years ago, started looking at the mountain. I decided to make a real estate move. My long-term goal is to really make Tenny Mountain thriving again. I'm a data guy, so I've studied the entire history of the mountain. From when the Hall family first were cutting the trails, and when they were doing well to where they failed and where everyone else has failed since then. And I think really what we're going to do different from other people, Einstein's definition of insanity, you guys all know that, is to do the same thing over and over again, expect different results. So we're actually not doing that. We're putting a lot of money in the mountain already, put $500,000 worth of new snow guns, which they haven't seen. We've repaired the entire snowmaking system, put about another $1 million worth of improvements into it to get us to where we are now today. And we're really building a team to make Tenny Mountain not just one of, but hopefully the best, ski resort in New Hampshire. And we'll talk a little about some of that, but it's something that I take great pride in. Go back to the whole exceptional thing. In my world, failure is not an option. We celebrated our 20th anniversary this year of both of my companies, so I'm just trying to benchmark that so you guys have an idea of who I am. So we started looking at the lodge, when I first bought it, and I was talking to Michael about just options, And one of the first things that was glaring to me was the lack of accessibility for handicapped people, elderly people, people with mobility issues. We started to look at some of those solutions. Where that touches home for me is my oldest daughter is actually got spina bifida, so she's in a wheelchair, so we're very understanding of all the ADA compliance issues and why they're important. So as we start to look at the topography of the land and how it might work, first we're looking at maybe trying to get a parking lot up there with another road, and really with the location of existing condominiums, it's too constraining to get an upper elevated parking lot with a road that would actually be compliant to, say, fire departments and things like that. So what a solution we came up with is building an elevated penthouse off the existing parking lot area, but there's also no defined handicap parking right now, so we're actually gonna make it defined handicap parking in the drop-off area. And you see the elevated tower here. It's a 2-story bridge with an elevator in the core. It's got a stairwell going around it as well. And you're gonna have it's gonna be a pretty dynamic look. It's not gonna be something we could really go inexpensive and have it not look very good with concrete or something like that, but it's gonna be all glass surround. There'll be a lot of lighting options that we can do to really, make a pretty dynamic presence as people approach the lodge. Kind of tough for you folks to see. Do you want me to move these up closer? Can you guys see from here?
We're good. Okay, that's good.
See the elevated 2-story bridge? Okay, first we'll bring everyone into the first floor of the building. Obviously, the upper level is actually integrated into what you see in a couple slides later, the expanded restaurant. So why don't we take this one down? Why don't you hold it up to me for a sec, just for 30 seconds, so everyone in the audience can actually see what we're talking about there. And we'll keep going. Now, here's a different viewpoint just from the other side. You can see we're showing just kind of diagrammatics of ski storage and whatnot, but I won't get too hung up on that. That's something that will evolve as the civil design comes into play. But now you have a different viewpoint. You can kind of see now the front of the lodge here. We've actually elevated, changed the roof structure to bring in a lot of glass. The glass brings in a lot of daylight. And something we're really looking at with the building itself is not only was it a struggle from an accessibility standpoint, but from a sustainability standpoint. It was built in the early 80s. There's nothing that's positive for the environment in that building, not the building envelope, none of the MEP systems. So we're actually, I've got a strong commitment to the environment myself, but as a company, we actually do a lot of stuff in the green building world. So we're actually looking at a lot of green building techniques and materials to use as we build the building. You'll see they were using some structural timber in conjunction with some steel elements but we're actually modeling a couple different, anyone here know what CLT is? Cross-laminated timber. Okay, so it's a really cool new, I won't say new, but it's an evolving technology. And we're looking at using possibly CLT. So a lot of different elements that we're working on that will make it really a green building. We're looking at water reclamation, solar, and also a little bit of a farm to table. We might have our own garden where we plant a lot of our own vegetables and herbs and things like that. So if you think about how this is a value add to the town of Plymouth, not just Tenny Mountain, I think it's going to be a pretty dynamic lodge when we're done. And our intent isn't to have it simply as a ski lodge either. We're going to be having it as a 4-season lodge, so we'll be doing a lot of things in the other seasons as well. So I think it's going to be a whole new addition to Plymouth that doesn't currently exist. What we're going to show you is a couple closer pictures, just to kind of give you a better idea of how dynamic the restaurant's going to be. This is just, the software we use can actually model at different times, so you see it when it is at night. We'll be able to illuminate it. Actually, we have some really, good lighting controls. We'll be able to, dim it up, dim it down. So there won't be an issue with in terms of, if someone thinks it's going to be too bright, we can certainly handle that easily with the type of systems that we're going to put in. But I think it's going to be a really cool, dynamic, entrance as people are coming up to that area as Tenny starts to evolve in the coming years. All right, coming to the game, Van. So a little bit of a closer up now view. So as you're looking at the upper deck, you see the restaurant is much more dynamic than the existing current lodge, which is, again, a lot of the glass, a lot of the structural timber elements, a lot of that, again, using sustainable elements. But it's really, we took a little bit of a holistic viewpoint and said, like, what do we really want to build there? And not only do we want to have the coolest place in, I'll say, New Hampshire, but then New England, we want to be a little bit different. So we're actually taking some of the concepts that are now used architecturally out in Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, and try to introduce some of them into this building. So not only would it be really cool from a sustainability standpoint, which is going to have a lot to talk about. If anyone knows anything about the CLT market, any CLT project gets national and sometimes international news, which you nod your head, so you might be aware of that. So but this could get a lot of presence in the whole ski community, which again will drive a lot of traffic to Plymouth and Tenny. Pretty sure you're all familiar. This is the side where the river flows right down here. Now you see how much more expansive the upper deck is. You can see the lower deck, it's also open as well down there, and there'll be egress and everything worked into that. Introducing a double-sided fireplace. For those who are familiar, there's an existing fireplace inside. We're going to actually keep that functionality, but a whole new fireplace will be built. It'll be double-sided. And again, you'll really start to see how by lifting the roof and changing the whole design, it really brings in the views of the mountain. With the existing roof, you've got gable ends here, and on the back, and that roof coming down, you actually can't even look up the mountain. You're missing the beauty of the nature. So by lifting the roof like that, you really bring the outside inside. I think it's really going to be an awesome, look and something that I think is different from any other place that I've seen. I've been doing a little bit of market analysis, checking different places out in Plymouth, just checking out the bars and restaurants, but also some of the places throughout the New Hampshire ski resort community. Just a little outside view. Again, it's just kind of cool to show you the coloration, but this is diagrammatic. We'll have heat lamps, much cooler lighting. It's just kind of conceptual at this point, give you an idea of what it's going to look like and how it's going to function. Again, picture this is a year-round resort now as opposed to just a ski resort. Really cool view right here. As you guys know, there's about a 6-foot wide wooden bridge. Mike and his team prior had to do the best they could to make that a little more structurally sound than I'll say it was. But I think it served its useful life right now, and we're looking at making it much wider, which would be much better for pedestrian safety and getting people on and off the ski slope into the lodge. But again, we're going to use all the same elements as we build a bridge that we did as building it around the rest of the building. So it's going to really look and feel the same on every side of the building. It's going to be pretty awesome. Is that the last one? So I'll stop there for a sec. We threw this up there just because it's a sample of what it could look like. What this is actually on the first floor balcony as you're coming across the bridge. And again, you think of some of the challenges in a New England atmosphere, you talk about weather and whatnot, we're modeling things like radiant heat, but we kept the handicapped access on that lower floor, and then we'll have another lift inside to get them up to the second floor, so there'll never really be an issue if people are coming off with wheelchairs, you know, getting, or even just with mobility issues, getting into the building, you know. So I want to pause for any questions there and see if there's anything I can answer before we go much deeper.
Are there questions or comments from the board?
Anyone want to see floor plans? Do they matter at this point? Probably not. Or do you want to see those?
I'm optimistic. I'm happy to see an investment happening there, and I think there's a lot of potential for redevelopment of this to bring a lot of energy into town. So.
I really think there is. We've actually been looking. I'm more of a data guy, so I'm actually not a skier, believe it or not. People think I'm a skier. I only ski like 4 or 5 times in my life. We played hockey for 7 months a year. My other son, and my daughter, so we just didn't have time to ski. But studying the infrastructure of Tenny, there's a lot of opportunity there to maximize and turn into a four-season mountain. I really think we could build a thriving community there on site, but that obviously expands to what's happening in and around Plymouth as well as Bristol and all the abutting towns. I think we could really make it something that's really positive for generations to come, which is something I'm personally proud of, from a legacy standpoint. The gentleman who just presented before us, I would welcome that hotel. That's going to be a place that people can come stay. Right now, that is something that's lacking in Plymouth, particularly if we're going to start to make a real ski mount to compete with a Loon Mountain or one of the what people perceive to be the premier mountains. So
I just wanted to echo what Phil said, but I also, on a kind of more technical level, along the way I heard several maybes and stuff, and just like, of course, when you go to the next phase of like site plan review, some of those maybes, right, should be answered, and not necessarily in terms of interior finishes and all that, but in terms of like, you said you had footprints, so I mean, that was like the only thing that was like, I was thinking in my mind. Yes, it sounds really exciting, and some of those maybes that impact our criteria for site plan review should be worked out right before you submit to the.
The only maybes were really the specific building materials, because we haven't got that little selection yet. We're actually modeling, ELV steel painted versus structural timber versus CLT, and all your MEP systems. All your mechanical systems can be a wide variety. So you have to get the building structure down first, and then see, okay, now what mechanical systems work well within that system.
I guess the other one I was thinking about was, like you mentioned, like perhaps like a farm to table thing with like a garden on site or something, and that what might play into your landscaping program, and whether or not that happened, like we should hopefully know like when you come with a site plan.
Sure, but I would think that that's only a bonus if we can do that. We were actually talking to one of the bartenders we're going to hire, and that's something that she's well versed at, is the craft cocktails, using some of the homemade herbs and all that stuff. So that's kind of what we're talking about things, but I don't think that'll be a prohibition, a big factor in the site plan review. It's certainly going to be a value add. It's something, to me, it's all about differentiation from your competition. So the more we can do to differentiate from our competition, the more people are going to love Tenny, want to come to ski at Tenny and stay at Tenny. And I don't know about some of the data. The real skiers will probably only occupy, say, 15 to 20% of the entire market who really love to challenge and ski. The rest they want to have a cool place to hang, hit a couple runs, have a cool town to go visit, and check out all the shops. I have a place in Wilkeboro, so we chose that really for that small town America vibe, going to the shops and everything like that. So I think we can do that here as well.
These are exciting plans. Thank you.
So are we asking? Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say that historically the town of Plymouth has supported development at Tenny Mountain ever since Sam Hall got started in the 50s. And the town, there have been numerous attempts to develop the mountain, but this is the first time I've seen a really solid plan. This mountain has more potential than most people realize.
So we've rode it. I've ridden it to check it out. There's a lot of corporate partners that would love to have a presence here. Jeep, major. You're talking outside the winter. Obviously, it's already on the highway for all the snowmobiles, right? But on the other season, Big mountain for X Games, big mountain for Jeep, which again drives traffic and popularity to the town of Plymouth. I think there's a ton of infrastructure that can be capitalized on, and there's a ton of growth potential and expansion actually with the acreage that we actually bought. Only 100 and probably 10 or 20 maybe of the 900 plus acres I've bought are currently skiable acres. You know, as this expands and we start to look at the bigger picture master plan, way beyond just the repositioning of the lodge, we plan on introducing more trails, more lists, and that growth of acreage and skiable trails starts to help really compete with the Loons and the Brettonwoods of the world, you know? And all of that, you know, extends into small town Plymouth, right? All of the retailers start to really get a lot more traffic. You need more hotels. PSU will hopefully thrive. I think you guys know from working on Mike in the past, we're looking to, you know, create a whole partnership with PSU and a whole job creation element to it too that we're really not getting into right now. It's part of, I'd say, another presentation, you know, but just for the physical, you know, repositioning of this lodge, you know, we happen to be subject matter experts in construction. Even just say, you know, the cell tower, we built 300-foot towers on top of mountains. So like building even the ski mountain tower is actually kind of easy in our world, you know? So it's like, there's nothing here we can't build. This would take some people long. Mike, this probably took us, what, 3 months working with the architects? And I, you know, I challenged them. I said, I want to see some different elements. We're going to introduce a little bit, like I said, a little bit of Utah, Colorado, some Wyoming, and, you know, but, you know, paying homage to New Hampshire, but really having that kind of link between the outside and the inside. And that's where the structural timber comes into play, the CLT comes into play, and some of the other things that we're looking at.
I was just going to ask, are you planning to make significant changes to the parking or the access road?
So that's all on the bigger picture discussion, right? Not so much, this is what we want to really attack first, is getting the lodge repositioned.
Okay.
Because what's going to happen is, good or bad, we can look at the last, say, 34 years of futility on Tenny Mountain, right? No disrespect to you, but I know you gave it the college try, but you know, you didn't have the right team around you, right? So the most important thing is we can't fail this first time because there's been so much failure in the past, right? So we have to start with a really good wow factor. So we reposition the existing lodge just so that people who've been to Tenny before are gonna come and go, wow, it's kind of cool, a little bit different, right? But what they're gonna notice is we cleared the trails, okay, for the first time in a long time. Mike and his team did some, but we cleared some trails that haven't been cleared in 25 and 30 years. You tell by the age of the tree growth, right? So the trails are cleared better than they've ever been cleared since Sam Hall first cut them and when they expanded them. And we actually introduced $500,000 worth of snow equipment, state of the art, like HKD. Who was I just talking to? They asked me, a snowmaker, what kind did you go with? I said HKD. He goes, wow. So we don't cut corners. Everything we do is best in class. So the skiing is going to be better than it's ever been at Tenny. But you can't have them come down to a lodge, particularly if they're new to Tenny for the first time. And also think, it's all right, you know. So we have to make a dynamic lodge to go with dynamic skiing, which then sets the stage for return customers, and then the evolution of the rest of the mountain kind of starts to take place.
Although to Phil's point, one of those access roads is rather treacherous.
I might have drawn my being up there first time.
I'm very sorry.
That is not, I think that belongs to the condo association, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
My GPS took me right up there, trust me. Every one of them.
Won't do that again, will you?
I'll drive the extra quarter mile, and I tell everybody. And people are like, yeah. The next thing they do, like, what was that right turn I'm supposed to take? Pay attention, you know?
Yeah.
But no, look, we get that, man. There's a huge, massive infrastructure need up there, all of the roads. That's the worst, Melvin, you know, but even Davis Road walk all the way around, the Tennybrook Road, all the roads need to be improved. There's a whole master plan. There's a lot of stuff that's gonna kind of go into that. I'd say next phase, I don't want to convolute this with that. This is just the beginning stage of drawing a presence and getting Tenny on the map, but people are like, wow, that place is really cool, and everything's gonna start to grow from there.
Mike?
So I love the idea of the outdoor seating on the deck, but you're facing the parking lot. How cool would it be to have all the seating facing the mountain where everybody wants to look?
Good question. But I'm gonna bring you a little, which I'm not gonna show you because we didn't bring that tonight, because that's really, I don't wanna confuse the master plan with what we're doing today. The bigger picture of the master plan that we're looking at is eventually this would be a mid-mountain lodge. Okay, so what you're actually looking at on the front are skiers who would be skiing across that parking lot down to a future lodge future, with lifts coming from there all the way up to the summit. And if you have a Google Earth and you look at Tenny Mountain, where the Hornet goes up kind of to the left, you'll see the center cut, when they cut the trails, stopped almost at the same elevation, but the true summit is up where the cell phone tower is, which, by the way, TCI has worked on the cell phone tower there. They actually want us to knock it down, we're too busy, and build a new one. So we're gonna be looking at, which we're modeling the Earth right now, extending the trails to the true summit, and we're modeling what it would look like if we went down beyond the parking lot today into the lower elevations where would locate a future lodge, which would be pretty dynamic. Why this would still flourish is in a four-season environment. In the fall, you're up in the middle of the mountains around the trees. You get the river raging, okay? It's a beautiful spot in the summer. You're looking at concert venues. Mike, as you all know, is a really intelligent engineer, run the data. It's a natural amphitheater on the slope, so look at some concert venues potentially. What does that take? Hotels. You know, you better have a place for people to stay. You know, so there's a lot of stuff we're looking at in the bigger picture. We'd have to solve for some of that civil engineering. What's the parking gonna look like at that point? Because obviously, when you take away the parking, they need additional parking. So we're looking at a lot of all that as part of the master plan, having potential off-site lots with shuttles, which plenty of ski resorts do. And then, if you look at this again on Google Earth of the master plan, where most of the trails come down here, we actually own the ridge over here too. In the longer term plan, I could see us eventually, and we could be talking 10, 15, 20 years, but bringing trails off of there and down around this way too. We're already looking like what those lifts might look like, and you might have ski bridges, and it gets involved, right? But that's the bigger picture vision to say how do you then solve for that? So it's a good question with a long answer.
The person who has the most knowledge of that mountain that's alive right now, besides Sam Hall, is his son Gardner Hall.
Who was at my lodge last night, who forwarded me on Saturday the interview they did on the history with the Historical Society, and I watched that Saturday afternoon with Steve and Gardner, being interviewed.
Super.
So I've met with Gardner several times. Met him for the first time probably 2 or 3 months ago. Called him up, introduced myself. We went and had dinner. He gave me some of the history. It was fascinating, and he came down Saturday. And what we're actually going to look to do, once I watched that the 1 hour interview, which I'd encourage everyone to do if you haven't done it yet, it was fascinating. Talk about true pioneers, taking a chainsaw to a mountain and starting there to bring the first road up was pretty awesome, And starting on Christmas Day, which was pretty cool too. Shows you how old school Mr. Hall was, right?
Besides Neil, I don't know if anybody else has met Sam besides me.
I work for Sam.
I told God and Steve after I saw it, so I sent them an email. I said, what I'd like to do, particularly with Steve, is at the stage of life he is at, we want to talk about doing some sort of naming convention to honor his father and the family, So that's something that we're talking about doing. Like Mike was already working on some sort of naming convention for Burton Boards, and unfortunately he passed away during COVID, but we're still going to do that with the snowboard park. But we want to look at something to honor, the Hall family as well.
Super. That's great.
So.
Just out of curiosity, will you be keeping the word ski in the mountain?
So, we will probably do as much as we can to preserve the historical element of Tenny, right? I'm a student of history and I appreciate history. But I can't tell you convincingly till we really look at an entire business plan, which is going to take years to truly develop. It's a multifaceted plan that's going to have to be achieved in phases. So we will most likely try to do as much as we can. I don't see us modifying that too much, to be honest. I see us more adding, but other than going up and coming down,
Yeah.
So, but I don't think that would disturb the ski, because it's actually, the unfortunate thing is that where all the existing condos are located, it creates almost a vortex like this where you're coming down to a bottleneck position, which forces us over what is the existing parking lot. If I had my druthers, Eagles Nest wouldn't be there, at least the first 30 houses, and we could actually bring it more of a continuum that way rather than a bottleneck, But the long straight answer is I think we're going to be able to keep ski, but we're going to see how the trails model down and the trails model up.
It's unique.
It's super cool. Really smart guys, Army Corps of Engineers.
The people that live out there, up that way, how are they with all of this?
I'm very careful what we tell people
Mhm.
because the pitchforks can come out really fast. And the reality is, a lot of unnecessary drama can begin by conversation that's not finalized yet.
Right.
So I tend to wait till I know before I tell people. They ask a lot of questions. I don't bullshit people. I'm very honest. I just tell them, I can't tell you yet. But what I can tell you is everything we do is going to be around the building a positive, sustainable. By the way, sustainable is super important. It can't be a flash in the pan gone in 5 years. So you have to have a sustainable, community building up there. It's going to take time. So I'm sure like anything else, there'll be people who are in support. There'll be the naysayers for whatever reason. End of the day, you start telling you can't keep everybody happy no matter what. You always get a competing dialogue.
I did speak with someone that lives up there the other day, and they said that they're very hopeful. They like seeing the camaraderie going on, but they're also a little reserved. So just so that I think
Well, that's life.
it is, but they're hopeful.
There's new, there's uncertainty, so in that uncertainty, there's always a pause for, concern, right? But all I can tell you is, if I were them and I saw what I was driving up the roads and no one's fixed them in years, and no one's really been able to do anything in years, we're not gonna fail. So everything we do, those houses worth 4x what they're worth today when we're done with our master plan. And those people are gonna have infrastructure, roads that work. We're gonna fix, you talk about water and sewer, we have to fix our water and sewer infrastructure. At least camera it and check some things out and see where things are working, get the water, the sewer treatment building back where it needs to be. So there's been a series, I'll say, of neglect by the existing condo associations, right? I'm just speaking very freely. I'll put it on public record because it's fact. I've already met with some of them, and there's no reserves built up. They haven't maintained the roads, and they can't because there's no money set aside. So that's just piss poor management, right? That's not going to happen. So the people who will resist change will be the ones who realize that we're gonna run this like a long-term sustainable association. You have to pay into a fund, and those monies have to actually be monitored and dealt with properly. There's no records of where the money has gone either for us, 5 years what it's worth. So without going too deep on that, we are going to create structure and organization within the Tenny Mountain Association, of which TVCA rolls up, and we all have a responsibility in that, but it's all going to be to build a long-term sustainable plan that will then allow everything else to grow around it.
Well, that's great. Thank you. That's a great idea.
Rebecca?
Just to say a couple things. First, so when things are presented in a full site plan review, it's really helpful. I know we've asked Mike McGinley for this as well. Any future phases that you kind of have in mind, it's helpful sort of see that, because as we look at it from our planning perspective, it's helpful for us to see that bird's eye view of it as much as you can. Obviously, I know trying to avoid sort of incremental change that leads to bad connectivity and bad choices in between, or not great choices, or things that don't fit within what we see in our master plan. I think that's just really helpful to have that information.
Understood, and I thought about that, but I don't want to complicate things. We're only talking about the lodge right now, right? And the more you start to introduce some of the bigger picture possibilities, there's 1,000 questions, and there's so much still to be studied. Like we're studying data right now that we don't even know whether we can or can't put trails here. What's it going to look like? So before you're even talking about stuff that isn't real, go back to what I just said. I don't like to talk about things that aren't even real yet, right? So what I know is real is this: we can build this, right? And if that's all we did and clear the trails like we did, it's still going to be better than it's ever been on Tenny, right? Then that's going to help then drive a lot of the other stuff that we're talking about. But that may take another year. There's a lot of data to figure out. If we start talking about where trails may or may not be able to go, then we have to go work with folks like you to figure out all that stuff, which is why I don't like to go to the public too often until you actually know it's kind of real. But we would come in with a whole presentation, whole site plan, civil drawings. We'd be able to show you all of that stuff.
All right. Thank you.
Makes sense.
Anything else?
Any
Well, I
questions?
wish you all a good night. I apologize for the late evening.
Thank you very much.
Fortunately, I think restaurants are closed. Might be McDonald's.
Panther Pub, is that they still open?
Oh, they're on.
All right.
Joseph, you
Try the Panther Pub.
and you're of that age. You probably
Yeah.
can
So,
get down there.
quickly, it's getting late.
Getting a little late.
Other business to members of the board and planning staff. I just wanted to update everyone. The HOP committee is moving forward, and we are meeting with our consultant, Barrett Consulting, this coming Tuesday, hopefully to get more information about what they want from us and also what information we can offer about what we want from them, but especially how we might be able to help the process. Any other business from members of the board? Yes?
Couple quick questions, hopefully they'll be quick. June?
Yes.
I know at one point, probably 6 or so months ago, I got an email saying that June would be leaving, but has that officially taken place?
She is still working, 10 hours a week, Joseph? Roughly, give or take?
Approximately.
Okay.
Yeah. So she's part-time, mostly remote, but she is still kind of consulting with us and giving us help like 10 hours a week.
For how long?
I don't really know, I don't think. Do we, Joseph?
But
Transition.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Just
instead of her spending
transition.
33% of her time sitting at the meeting, she's
Oh,
doing
yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
That's perfect. I was just curious. I didn't get a
I
chance
didn't
to
I
say
didn't know
goodbye.
that. I wasn't
So,
sure about that either.
The other question I had, and I didn't bring it up earlier, but the gentleman that had the southern accent
Yeah.
made a comment, he's just getting started on his property. I'm pretty sure there are still lots for sale up there. Is there any responsibility, not from this board, but from the town, if there is all of these issues that are taking place, if tie-ins aren't where they're supposed to be, and it
Besides
seems
buyer
like-
beware, Phil?
Right, I mean, it really is, it's a private transaction between the buyer and the developer. I mean, he said he was gonna provide that, he should have records of it. It's kind of due diligence on their part when they buy the property to understand what they're getting.
As I understood, I think Jeff only had one lot left, and that was 15 years ago.
But I think that
I don't know if
some of
developers.
the lots have been bought and sold, but if people buy them and don't develop them and choose to sell them, I mean,
It's happened.
Which is, I think
there
it's
still should be
happened.
chain of custody, and the deed should be clear. I mean, I had a question about the owner who said that, the neighbor had encroached. I mean, that's typically a neighbor.
It's not a planning board issue.
No, it's not. It's a neighbor issue of not knowing your boundaries. I mean,
The subdivision plan has to be recorded at the Grafton County deeds.
It was.
So the surveyor who did the plan,
And the attorney that did the meets and bounds and descriptions, that has to be there.
that has to
each deed,
correlate.
each deed should have, there should be boundaries, but it's up to the.
I got 3 more, actually.
Go ahead. I'll let you go.
Oh. Past my bedtime.
Anything else from the board? Are there public comments? I think we've actually outlasted Frank.
I have one comment. I'm sorry, did you?
Can I borrow your comment?
Just so you guys are aware, and I know, just sort of piggyback off your comment, like a lot came on a few days ago for sale on Chattering. And I know it's like nothing to do with the town, it's a private, but it's marketed like public town water and sewer at the street.
That's the realtor's problem, not
Yeah,
ours.
I know it's already done, I know it's.
That's. I mean,
100%, I understand that, I'm just letting you guys know.
Yeah.
So you're taking a beating from the town,
It's
from the town.
it's actually
Yeah.
a private water and sewer system.
Right, yeah, but I'm just saying like.
That should be well known that that's a private water system and it's a private
Yeah.
sewer system.
But a lot of people have bought lots up
That's
there
all, but I was
without
saying, when you're
understanding.
getting yelled at by people.
Yeah.
It's, being marketed.
What's that?
Actually, I do have a question.
Yep.
Sorry for interrupting. As from the Conservation Commission, for Riverside Landing, right, there's the wetlands and over there as that development happens. Will Lisa Donner be kept updated just informationally as that development does?
Is she the wetlands?
She's chairman of conservation.
All the information is sorry.
Is this actually going before them already?
I don't know if it,
I don't think there's
yeah.
an issue.
Yeah, I think there was a amended wetlands permit application with respect
That's what I
to
was
this,
thinking about, yeah.
which was forwarded, I know, to the
Okay.
Conservation Commission, to my understanding.
Which I think reflects the changes that are going to be in this development, I think, right?
That was how it appeared.
I'm hoping that the town is-
Rebecca?
Well, so as somebody who did serve on both the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board at one point, it's great to have a member in common who can bring that. Are you still on the Conservation Commission, Mike? So bringing that information to the Conservation Commission can be really helpful. I know that our staff is overworked now, as there's just 1.25 of them now. So I would just encourage you guys to stay up to speed on agendas and things like that. And all the information that's presented to us is available. It's all public record, so.
Thank you.
We could run the clock at 10. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right.
It's a great question.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. 9:23.
Thank you for all of the.